subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Thicken and mysterious. Diana, angel of wisdom. Diana ignored his remarks and opened a golden parchment. Then, she read the contents aloud. Will Septon is required to participate in the coming war by the order of eternal blazing Sunday. Will sighed as he heard the order. But before he could say anything, he and Diana noticed a something in their perception. Plants and trees in the city began to grow abnormally, absorbing nutrients from unknown sources. The tree began to grow long, and roots erupted from the ground, as various plants began to sprout from the very roots. Flowers bloomed in a range of colors on the planets, ranging from white to even dark brown. When viewed from above, the entire city appeared brilliant, as if it were literally blanketed in a kaleidoscope of colors. Roar! A roar echoed, as a majestic lion appeared in the desolate streets of the capital, followed by various other animals. Marching wherever the plants and trees began to grow taller, it was as if they were following someone. A natural paradise. Diana felt no other description fit this. It also made her yearn for the power of God. The entire change around her was most likely caused by Earth Mother passing by. She couldn't imagine what it would be like if Earth Mother asserted her authority. Diana looked around, and only the bench and the area around her were unaffected by the ever-growing trees and plants. Then, she was perplexed when she saw Will, who was still trying to protect his freaking ice cream despite everything that was going on around them. But she immediately looked at the ground, not daring to move because she sensed a divine presence in the sky. Even though she yearned for godly power, she did not abandon her fear of gods. She was well aware that not all gods are as kind as her Lord. She also didn't have to think to figure out who it was in the sky. Earth Mother. However, she caught a glimpse of Will out of the corner of her eye. Then her eyes widened. Will looked up at the sky and noticed a divine woman appear with a flash of green light. She was dressed in a white gown that was embroidered with images of herbs and plants. Earth Mother appeared to sense his gaze and stared down at him from the sky. Will didn't even flinch when she looked at him, and he immediately waved his hands at her with a cheerful smile on his face, as if he was nothing more than a curious kid. When Earth Mother saw this, she smiled and waved back to him from the sky before disappearing. The divine presence also receded and moved towards the nearby on-tall mountains. You're really getting into your role. Diana was stunned. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Others described her as courageous, and when compared to the kid before her, she was literally nothing. Even though she didn't see how Earth Mother reacted, she could make a guess based on Will's still intact and cheerful demeanor. All gods aren't frightening, especially Earth Mother, who was rumored to be the kindest of all. Will smiled as he noticed her expression. You should know better than to believe these rumors. Diana abruptly paused as she realized how she was advising him, which really looked like adults advising children, under his manipulation. Will's smile brightened as he saw Diana's realization. This situation is not simple, for it is an important part of his acting. You know what? This is not important anymore. I'm here to inform you that you will be needed at the headquarters immediately, with a briefing for war will soon begin. The gods are arriving one by one, and all of the angels are gathering there. You are not permitted to roam around here, regardless of your unique situation. Diana sighed, finally calming down, and didn't bother to say anything else to Will before diving right into the topic. I really can't escape. Will said, his face sad. Nothing comes without a price, Will. You should be more knowledgeable about this than I am. You've had the sanctuary of the 6 gods up to this point. Thus, you didn't have to worry about the true creator or the angel of fate under him. Diana said solemnly. Will's childish expression faded, and he said with a sigh, Fine, but wait a minute, Diana. I'll take the ice cream. Will said, as he wanted to take the ice cream from the bench. Boom! Just then, thunder roared in the sky, quaking the entire city. No! Will shouted. My ice cream! Boom! As the twilight faded and dark clouds covered the entire sky, thunder boomed once more in the sky. However, The golden light of the sun shone through the dark clouds, dispersing the most of the dark clouds in the sky. As if enraged by the sun's light, streaks of blue lightning began to flash in the remaining clouds. "Idiot!" Diana yelled at Will, as she was trying to keep her balance against the oppressive pressure from above. She didn't hesitate to take the tragic Will's hand with hers. Their figures became illusory and soon vanished from the streets. A/N. I just want to respond to some comments and questions from here and other websites. 1. How could Oculus teleport despite the fact that he has no connection to the door pathway? I like to point out that Oculus is a god. Klein could even phase through flames when he was only a magician. So, what stops Oculus from teleporting through the literal sunlight? 2. When Klein searches for it, the miracle invoker characteristic are already transformed into sealed artifact within the Church of Oculus. So how did Oculus obtain the second miracle invoker characteristic for Blaze? What a silly question. It's simple logic. Blaze became an angel by utilizing that characteristic. There was no second one. Also, I like to point out that my fanfiction is far from perfect, and I'm making the entire story from the fourth epoch, which only contains facts in the original story. I'm making up the rest of it with my imagination, so there will obviously be some inconsistencies with the original book, which you can point out if you find them. But if you want a perfect story, I am far from capable, because I am not a professional writer. Chapter 41. Lilith and Bladhiel, Northern Continent, on tall mountains. A illusory golden door soared above the mountain range's highest peak, emitting an endless radiance. The radiance completely engulfed the entrance to the divine kingdom, transforming it into a vast expanse of light. Within the light, however, a shadow of an illusory castle was visible. The door had a mythical and gentle feel to it, making anyone yearn for the eternal paradise that lay within. This is the divine kingdom of eternal blazing sun, which was separated from the real world by this illusory golden door. A white castle perched on the crest of a mountain in the divine kingdom, with a lake in front and vast flights of white flowers all around. In a room within the castle, two divine figures sat on a long silver table with 6 chairs, 2 at the head and foot of the table and 2 on each side. "How can you expect me to believe Ominines?" A giant grumbled to the white-haired man in the main seat from one of the silver chairs on the side. "You should be aware, she has a way with pesky plots and tricks, and we could never anticipate it until it was too late. You don't have to be concerned about that," the white-haired man said casually. "I'll take care of her concealment." His purple eyes sharpened, as if it could pry through all mysteries and secrets. "And Ammonizes should be well aware of the situation we're facing. You don't have to be concerned about her backstab." He chuckled and stated the obvious. The hermit, the twilight giant, sighed as he caught a sight of the purple eyes, and while he was relieved, he continued to inquire. "Without appropriate evidence, Oculus, this alliance you're planning will fall apart. It's not a problem for me to believe you and take your word for it. Your brothers, on the other hand, will not be the same." The word brothers was emphasized by the twilight giant. "I don't want a full-fledged war to erupt right now," the giant asserted, knowing that if those 3 could not find common ground now, he is certain that war would erupt between them. The other gods will be forced to choose sides at the time, and everything will regress into chaos. They cannot afford chaos, which is also what Solomon wishes to see the most. "Amon never disappoints, Bladhiel." Oculus smiled as he took a bronze book from nowhere and placed it on the table. "Did you really aim at Amon?" Bladhiel inquired, sitting up straight and his attention completely focused on this subject. He did, however, cast a glance at the book before asking. He noticed the spear piercing the atmosphere and heading towards the Solomon Empire, since the entire sky was illuminated by light, and the spear was like the sun descending on the world. However, he was unaware of the outcome because it occurred within the Solomon Empire. He could also deduce from Osis's words that the book was obtained through Amon, who Oculus most likely used as pawn in his plans, which really surprised Bladhiel because he didn't expect Oculus to become such a scheming guy. The resemblance of White Angel in his memory was completely gone when he saw Oculus now. Oculus gave a nod. "So, what happened?" Bladhiel immediately inquired. "What do you anticipate?" Ocuses stated as he rose from his seat. He pulled the same card like when he was a kid, and his daddy arrived just in time to save him. What? Badhiel questioned, his face blank, as if he didn't understand what he was saying. Ocuses sighed and didn't want to bother anymore. He was standing in front of the door, staring at it. Your mother is also here. Perhaps you could ask her. Without turning back to face Badhiel, he said with a chuckle. Creak. Lilith entered the room with a gentle smile as the large white door to the room opened. Honesty. Ocuses took a deep breath, his heart racing. How the hell is she that beautiful? It didn't change now. Seeing her still made him restless in his heart, even as a god, with divinity. Her beauty is certainly superior to even those jade beauties depicted so clearly in Chinese cultivation novels. Why was he so certain? When one considers Lilith's past, she can also be considered the personification of beauty itself. Her beauty could not even be expressed in words. Ocuses. Lilith smiled as she looked at him. When Ocuses looked at her, he could tell she had changed, which is rare for a god. But, given what had occurred, this came as no surprise to him. Her eyes, which had previously been calm and serene, now had a vibrancy to them, and her smile had a genuine feeling to it. Ocuses complimented her with a smile. You look stunning. When Lilith heard that, she raised her brows in intrigue. But she didn't reply because there was still another person in the room. Mother, Badhiel said in low voice, his eyes darting sideways. Oh, Ocuses' heart was intrigued, and he wished he had his wine to watch this drama unfold. Badhiel, hasn't it been a long time? Lilith spoke gently, her eyes filled with concern, just like a real mother. Yes, mother, Badhiel said, still not looking at Lilith, in an awkward tone. How have you been lately? Did Lilith stage some kind of fallout with Badhiel? As the strange atmosphere filled the entire room, Ocuses thought, but his reaction is simply, it's been really good. Lilith said calmly, if you don't include the fact that I almost died the other day, it's all good. Just as the atmosphere became increasingly strange. Boom. The sound of thunder booming attracted everyone's attention. Ocuses' eyes glowed as he observed everything going on outside through the light of sun. The entire sky of Alia's kingdom was covered in black clouds, with blue lightning flashing in it. This was a direct challenge to his authority. Whether it was Lilith or Badhiel, they restrained their power, thus only affecting the area around them. I'm needed there. Ocuses addressed two of them. He is here. Wait a second, Ocuses. Badhiel got out of his chair. I'll also come. He moved swiftly, as if he didn't want to be here anymore. And how about you? Ocuses asked Lilith. I'm fine right here. Lilith stated as she looked around the castle. Don't fight with him and try to find common ground. Ocuses nodded and turned to face Badhiel, who had a relieved look on his face for a brief moment, but didn't escape his sharp eyes. All right, let's go, he said to Badhiel, and stopped paying attention to them, for he was about to face his sworn brother for the first time in a long while. They both vanished in a flash of light that illuminated the surroundings brightly. Under the light of the sun, Ocuses and Badhiel appeared in the sky, filled with dark clouds. Oh, Ocuses, you're finally willing to show up. And scornful voice thundered through the black clouds as the blue lightning began to gather. The voice continued without giving him the opportunity to respond. I was surprised to learn that it was you who wanted to start the alliance in the first place. It's very unlike you. It appears that the times have done wonders for the once proud white angel. The vanity, arrogance, everything seems to have vanished when I look at you now. Chapter 42, Tyrant Capital, Alia's Kingdom, Northern Continent. Ocuses said, I can't say the same for you, though. It appears you're still the same musclehead like you were back then. He had a mocking smile while speaking, as if enraged by his remarks. The lightning in the dark clouds began flashing at a rapid rate. Boom! Then, a bolt of lightning roared out of the dark clouds at Ocuses, carrying the power to destroy the very earth itself, while lighting up the surroundings. As his expression became solemn, Badhiel took his sword, which was bathed in twilight. He really shouldn't have expected much from them. Given their personalities, this should have been completely predictable. However, he raised his brows in surprise when he saw Ocuses just stood there in the sky, surrounded by the brilliance of sun, without making any move, despite the lightning coming at him. Ocuses smiled as he looked at the lightning, which possessed the power of a planet. He didn't do anything except stare at the lightning, as if he knew nothing was going to happen. The lightning suddenly brightened when it was not far from him, and a figure morphed out of the light. Immediately, a tyrannical aura swept unrestrainedly. Even angels gathering in the headquarters far away felt absolute oppression on their body and soul. Many even fainted and knelt under this aura. A dignified man with blue hair and stormy eyes appeared in front of him. He was dressed in black armor, as if he'd arrived prepared to fight. The blue cloak of his armor swayed in the strong winds. He held a blue trident encrusted with lightning in his hands. Lord of Storms, Leotaro. Contrarily, Leotaro did not attack immediately after appearing. It appeared that not everything had changed. You're still as sharp-tongued as you were back then. His voice thundered across the sky as he spoke majestically. Oh, Ocuses stated exaggeratedly. If I am a sharp-tongued, then into which category will you fall? He was abruptly cut off as a divine aura swept over his figure. Leotaro snorted and raised his trident, pointing at him as lightning began to gather in it, with enough power to make star-killer beams look like firecrackers. The intention of the war is clear. You will lose, Ocuses stated calmly, as if it were a matter of fact. His eyes were turning purple. Is that what gives you the confidence? Hermit, Leotaro said, as his eyes gleamed with no intention of retreating. How about we find out? Isn't it been a long time since we had a friendly spar, Ocuses? Ocuses smiled as a white spear appeared in his hand, emitting a radiance of light. Come on, he grinned. If you want war that much, then I will grant it. Much to Leotaro's great annoyance, he said magnanimously. Ocuses will not back down or even try to talk him out of it. He knew Leotaro well enough to know otherwise. Leotaro is an absolute tyrant. Leotaro had the courage to go and challenge Ammonizes for his apotheosis ritual. So the man standing before him was anything but simple. He survived under her scythe. Even though Ammonines was going easy on him, it's still a big deal for a king of angels without uniqueness to face a god. Ocuses didn't want war now, but that doesn't mean he'll passively accept someone challenging his authority. Soon after, a terrifying divine aura erupted from two of them, shaking the entire world sky. Natural disasters erupted all over the world, as if nature was at war with itself. The sky has raged with lightning storms, as if feeling the wrath of the ruler of the skies. The oceans rioted, causing massive tsunamis and submerging islands. To top it all off, a powerful earthquake struck the continents. At the same time, the golden sun in the sky, which gave life and light to the entire world, expanded and became incredibly large. It appeared as if the sun itself was falling into the world for many. The sky was divided, with one half filled with vast expanses of light and the other with storms. You all need to relax. This is exactly what Solomon wishes for. Badheel attempted to calm the situation as he saw how things were spiraling out of control. Badheel, get out, exclaimed Leotaro. This is only between us, brothers. When he heard what Leotaro said, Badheel's eyes twitched and he felt helpless in his heart. Leotaro's eyes started to glow blue, with lightning streaks erupting from the edges. He was floated in the vast expanse of black clouds, with blue lightning flashing across it. His trident was also completely illuminated by lightning. Ocuses' eyes began to completely glow with light, and his casual suit burned away as golden flames swept across his body, revealing white armor beneath. He was standing in a light-filled sky, and pure light began to gather in the tip of his white spear. Everything suddenly calmed down. Literally all of it went quiet. The calm didn't last long, and just like after the calm before the storm, it broke in a spectacular way, with the entire sky around the world lighting up at the same time in a mix of golden and blue hues. Ocuses, Leotaro exclaimed with excitement as he moved at breakneck speed towards Ocuses, literally transforming into blue lightning. Leotaro! Ocuses also shouted with a grin, feeling long-lost excitement rekindle in his heart at the moment. He knew what was causing this. It was the thrill of battle, just pure fighting without worrying about anything. He also found it amusing that they were reenacting the famous Naruto scene to some extent. Arceus dashed towards Leotaro, erupting in a blaze of pure light, transforming into a beam of light. At the same time, Badheal, who was standing nearby in the sky, inserted his sword into the very space itself. Then twilight erupted, mixing with golden and blue hues, forming a strange curtain that draped over the entire battlefield. Lilith appeared and stood not far from Badheal, with a sigh as she saw the situation. Then various plants and trees grew on the very curtain, forming another layer over the curtain. The curtain, combined with the power of all four gods, completely prevented the battle from affecting the outside world. Boom! The reality completely collapsed in their path, as the beam of pure light and blue lightning dashed towards each other. The light in the battlefield became blinding, as even Badheal and Lilith were forced to close their eyes. Just then, in the middle of the battlefield, a crimson moon rose up like a scene from the apocalypse, followed by an illusory white tower brimming with an aura of insanity and destruction. The crimson moon and white tower emitted a terrifying aura, causing pure beam of light and blue lightning to freeze in their path. The light beam collapsed into the figure of Arceus, as the hands of a divine woman tightly pressed on his shoulder, holding him down, while also hovering behind him. The crimson moon hung behind the woman like a divine halo. She wore a long black gown adorned with countless resplendent lights. Evernight Goddess Ammonizes. Chapter 43. Trunsoist. I take back what I said previously. Ammonines said in an ethereal voice as she let go of his shoulder and floated beside him. You're still somewhat the same as you were back then, reckless and without any concern for consequences. Her voice remained ethereal, but with each word, the darkness thickened around her. Arceus sighed in disappointment at the battle being interrupted. He hadn't felt this excited in a long time, since becoming a god. He can also detect anger in Ammonine's tone, and while he understands why she is angry, he was still indifferent. Even though he accepted Leotaro's challenge, he did not initiate this, and he also cannot sit back and watch Leotaro behave like that in his kingdom. Arceus waved his spear, causing it to shatter into light particles that swept over his figure before dissipating, revealing him in a casual black suit rather than silver armor. He started walking towards Badheal and Lilith, not bothering to say anything to her. Ammonine sighed as she observed Arceus' indifference, then turned to face Leotaro, who had gone ahead of her and Herabergen. She specifically told him to wait, so that they wouldn't have any problems with her in the middle of them. However, looking at the situation, she felt helpless. It may appear that only the fight between Leotaro and Arceus is taking place, but Ammonines noticed Solomon and true creator's gazes here. She was confident that they would not pass up a golden opportunity to strike. Take your hand off my shoulders, old man. Leotaro grumbled in disgust. Before he could swat the hand that was holding him down, the hand let go of his shoulder, and the figure hovering behind him also floated down. An elderly man dressed in a black hod robe. He had starry blue eyes and white beard, and he was holding a book with an omniscient eye on his other hand. Herabergen, god of wisdom and knowledge. What more could anyone possibly expect from you two? Herabergen spoke calmly, his gaze shifting between Arceus and Leotaro. Look at you, despite the fact that everything has devolved into complete chaos. You two are still fighting and discarding everything with little regard for the consequences. Oh, Arceus said, turning to face Herabergen. You should first get off the high horse, Herabergen. He looked at the Herabergen, who was floating slightly above, holding his book and looking down at them. Despite his calm tone, anyone could sense his condescending attitude from his words. You speak as if you are above us, Leotaro said bluntly, and paused for a moment as a mocking smile appeared on his lips. Then he continued, Dragon of Betrayal. He didn't think twice about using the infamous title of Herabergen. When Arceus heard that name, he smirked. Herabergen was far superior to him and Leotaro if it comes to betrayal. One of the main reasons why the Dragon of Imagination, Ankelwelt, the most powerful ancient god, died at the hands of the ancient sun god, was Herabergen's backstab of ankle welt at a critical moment of battle. Despite hearing his infamous title, Herabergen appeared calm. However, his blue eyes started glowing, which were like stars in the night sky, and the divine aura that erupted from him said otherwise. Lilith and Badheal approached Ocuses and stood beside him. They maintained silence, with no intention of intervening. "Enough," Amonine said, as darkness exploded around her figure like a tide. It swept away the remaining light and thunder, as well as the illusory white tower, and they all vanished silently within darkness. She appeared in the midst of them all and spoke, radiating an aura of terror. "We're on the verge of war with Sasserer and Solomon, but you three still can't put your differences aside. There's also Badheal here. Can you see me and him bickering like kids? Get your things together, or let's put an end to this alliance once and for all." Leodoro snorted when he heard Amonine's, but he still put his trident away. Herabergen, meanwhile, retracted his divine aura and floated downwards. Now. While walking towards Amonine's, Ocuses said, "Given the importance of alliance, you don't have to say something like that, Amonine's. It was just a friendly brawl between us." He didn't think twice about labeling that fight, which shook the world, as a simple spar. "We were never serious, and everything before was just a way for us to greet each other. Isn't that right, Leodoro Herabergen?" He didn't hesitate to sprout bullshit to calm Amonine's, and then turn to look at them. He cannot afford for the alliance to fail, which it will if Amonine's back down. Even though he expected something like this to happen, still he became a little carried away when Leodoro challenged him. After noticing his gaze, Leodoro and Herabergen agreed with a nod. Despite the fact that Leodoro was a little stiff while doing so, Amonine's retracted her aura and looked at them deeply, especially Leodoro, who frowned. But she didn't bother any longer and said to everyone, "All right, let's go." The six gods were finally able to gather peacefully in a room inside the White Castle. As the sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, a long silver table with 6 chairs was present in the center of the room. Ocuses sat in the front chair, while Amonine's sat at the foot of the table. Lilith and Badheal sat in the 2 seats on the right, followed by Leodoro and Herabergen on the left. The seating arrangement was obviously not simple. Ocuses was taking the main seat, not just for hosting this entire event, but also for making it possible with Amonine's coming in second. "Let's begin," Ocuses said, while raising his hand to tap on the bronze book on the table. Several ripples erupted from the bronze book and merged with reality. It caused the reality around the silver table to blur and haze, and then everything went dark. The darkness did not last long, as it was illuminated by dim light, revealing a scene of black pyramid-style mausoleums. The entire structure exuded an aura of chaos. The entire silver table floated in front of the mausoleum. Immediately, the scene changed, revealing a dimly lit room with a platform in the center and a man dressed in aristocratic attire standing before it. A brass book was present on the platform, emitting an absolute aura of order, which immediately drew the attention of all gods. A man stood directly in front of the platform, with brass-colored hair and golden eyes. He had very attractive facial features and exuded a scholarly aura. The man in the projection appeared to notice the gazes of 6 gods, which were now on him, and immediately bowed. Chapter 44, Justiciar Uniqueness, yet another traitor. Those appear to be in plenty during these times. Amonine said ethereally as she gazed at Trunsoist. "I think it's very wrong to label someone like that, Amonines. The situation may have forced him to make this decision." Herabergen mused after hearing Amonines. "The Solomon Empire is far from fair and filled with corruption, whereas I sense a thirst for justice and order in Trunsoist." Lilith smiled, her red eyes gleaming as she looked at Trunsoist. "Interesting, such a contradiction, just like order and chaos. It's hard to expect much when the Black Emperor himself represents distortion and chaos." Badheal also commented after hearing his mother. "There's a more pressing issue, Ocuses. How do you know Trunsoist was not sent here to us by Solomon himself?" Leodoro inquired solemnly. He was not attempting to sabotage the alliance solely because it was led by Ocuses, for he knew better given the circumstances. He was simply expressing an extremely plausible possibility. The gods all fell silent and started down at Trunsoist. Trunsoist was under immense pressure as the six gods' scrutinizing gazes fell on him. Even though he couldn't hear what they were saying, he could still guess that they were judging him. He finally gathered the courage to look up and face the gods. They were present in colossal silver chairs that dwarfed the platform in front of him by a huge margin. The silver chairs surrounded the platform in a U shape. The gods were obviously towering compared to him, with a white-haired man in the center chair and a black-haired lady with gauze over her face sitting in another chair right beside that white-haired man. He has an instinctive feeling that both of them were far more powerful than the other gods who sat beside them. He immediately recognized them as Eternal Blazing Sun and Evernight Goddess. Both were also infamous in the Solomon Empire, as Eternal Blazing Sun was widely regarded as a ruthless and insane heretic god, and Evernight Goddess was similarly vilified due to her authority over darkness. His Majesty really went to great lengths to smear the six gods. Trunsoist was also amused by how things had turned out for him, and he wanted to laugh madly, releasing his suppressed emotions for how he was confronted with the harsh reality of Solomon's empire, which was far different from what he had expected and learned of. Trunsoist was born into a noble family that swore allegiance to Solomon long before the establishment of the Solomon Empire. He was raised with empire's beliefs, so he was terrified of heretic gods and also harbored hatred for them in his heart, while his admiration for the Black Emperor grew by day. He felt ironic as he stood before the same heretic gods, looking back at his naive, teenage self. "I am certain," Ocuses replied, whilst also placing his hand on his chin. "He's on our side." "Ocuses, can't you be more specific?" Even after hearing this, Leotaro didn't let go, raising his hands to point towards Trunsoist. "He is not your average angel in the Solomon Empire. He is Solomon's direct subordinate. How can you be so certain?" "Trunsoist is on our side." Despite his fears and self-doubt about coming here, his conviction did not waver in the end. As Umbella previously stated, this angel has a genuine desire for justice and order. Amonines finally spoke up, and he's far from being able to fool someone like Amon. Leotaro was finally silenced by her words. Amonines was naturally aware of what had occurred, as Ocuses had informed her via the Phoenix. Ocuses finally saw their silence after the discussion, then waved his hand to remove the order placed by him, which is what prevented Trunsoist from hearing them. This drew the attention of Trunsoist, who appeared calm and composed despite the six gods' attention on him, but his slightly trembling hands and nervous eyes completely betrayed him. "Where is Elitsa Tutor, Trunsoist?" Ocuses inquired directly, his face frowning. Trunsoist felt a sense of dread rise within him as he saw Eternal Blazing Sun's frown. The weight of the god's gaze was too much for the angel to bear, thus his body trembled. To make matters worse, he became more nervous as he thought of his Majesty. "You don't have to be so worried." As a tranquil atmosphere filled the entire hall, Amonine's serene voice sounded, driving away all his nervousness and causing him to calm down. "I am concealing the entire meeting, and the Order of Ocuses is also present. Solomon will be unable to find anything unless you are in front of him." She said it as if she could see right through him. Trunsoist finally took a breather after hearing that, and responded to Eternal Blazing Sun with a prepared and practiced response. "Your Excellency, Elitsa, is currently dealing with the chaos caused by your attack on the Solomon Empire. He couldn't find an appropriate time because the War Angel is with him." His eyes wandered purposefully while answering, as he didn't want to make eye contact with Eternal Blazing Sun, whom he really fears. He couldn't get the descending sun off his mind, and the sheer power that the spear carried filled him with dread. This grew stronger when he knew that both the Majesty and the true Creator took action together to stop the calamity of Sun. "Is Medici keeping an eye on Elitsa?" Ocuses said with a smirk on his lips as he considered the future. It appears Solomon finally got some brains and begun to doubt the loyalty of his subordinates. Leotaro also stated after hearing the words of Trunsoist. Despite the fact that Medici swore allegiance only to the creator, after the formation of the Solomon Empire, he created his own division of army and integrated into the empire. So, even if Medici may disdain Solomon's orders in his heart, given the importance of the alliance between Solomon and his lord, Medici will not hesitate to follow if his lord also desires it. It's unlikely. Badheel refuted his words. Yes, if Solomon wants to keep an eye on Elitsa, I believe he would choose someone under his command rather than going to Medici. Harabergen agreed with Badheel. However, Medici should be watching over Elitsa, but not under order to Solomon. Sasser, Leodoro interpreted him. It should be him, even though he went insane after everything that happened. The anchors brought by the entire Solomon Empire could have somewhat stabilized his state, and he would have had no difficulty locating the true problem within the empire. Lilith stated calmly. Leodoro frowned as he heard that, while Amonines remained silent. Well, as the discussion died down, Ocuses spoke up. There won't be any issues with Sasserer, so let's get on with the business at hand. His vague comments deepened Leodoro's frown, while Harabergen's starry eyes twinkled, very much resembling like Dumbledore for Ocuses. They didn't speak up anymore, though. Amonines, Badheel, and Lilith remained silent as Ocuses' gaze finally fixed on the brass book on the platform. The brass book is Justiciar Uniqueness. Even though it is only a projection formed by the power of uniqueness, it is more than enough for the gods to see the truth of the matter. Did you still have the Justiciar Uniqueness with you, Trunsoist? Ocuses asked, his gaze fixed on Trunsoist. There is also a chance that Solomon could take the uniqueness after he attacked, and that the projection in front of them was made beforehand by Trunsoist. Trunsoist had gone silent in a daze after hearing the gods' discussion, which he could hear now, as they didn't seem to care about keeping him out. Sasserer, as in the dark angel under the creator. Trunsoist was perplexed when he heard the gods refer to the true creator as Sasserer. Didn't true creator said to be a part of creator? Could it be that dark angel as well? His thoughts came to a halt as he felt his instincts scream in danger, and immediately looked up, only to notice the sharp gaze of the eternal blazing Sunday. He didn't dare to think any further into it. Instead, he immediately controlled his thoughts in his mind using the method he devised. Trunsoist replied hoarsely, still trying to gather himself. It is still with me, Your Excellency. Did Solomon never suspect you? Harabergen inquired, his starry eyes twinkling. His question caused all the gods to turn to look solely at Turnoist. No, Trunsoist admitted. Then he felt the pressure on his body increase exponentially, causing him to tremble, but he still didn't hesitate to continue. However, I am free of the Emperor's suspicions since the Angel of Time was exposed as a traitor by the Emperor himself. The Emperor is now preoccupied with dealing with the avatars of the Angel of Time and the impending war. So the Emperor still asked me to be the guardian of uniqueness. Trunsoist felt dread rise within him as he said this, because many things he hadn't considered before became clear at the same time. The attack on the Solomon Empire by the eternal blazing sun was most likely aimed at Amon, thus exposing the Angel of Time's involvement to the Emperor, making the Angel of Time bear the entire blame, while suspicions on others would have been mostly cleared. Trunsoist felt nothing but awe and fear for eternal blazing sun. Harabergen's calmness faded as he heard the Trunsoist's words, and it was replaced by solemnity, while Leodoro's expression dignified as he began tapping the armrest with his fingers. It's also fairly simple for them to deduce the same thing from Trunsoist's words. Meanwhile, Lilith's smile remained unaffected, and Badheel stayed calm. However, it was difficult for anyone to gauge at Ammonine's mood or expression due to the gauze covering her face, which concealed everything. The atmosphere in the entire hall grew dismal by moment. Ocuses seemed unfazed by all of it and stated, "All right, let's move on from the topic of uniqueness and focus on another important person." He paused for a moment before continuing. Bethel Abraham, Chapter 45, Bethel Abraham, Bethel Abraham. There was only silence among the gods after hearing that name. The silence was abruptly broken by a thunderous voice. Bethel Abraham is a major variable, if not a lethal threat. As his hand hammered on the armrest, sparks of lightning flashed all over him. Leodoro stated this. Even though he's just the king of angels, he has the power to thwart our plans. But Bethel isn't like the rest, Leodoro. We should have a better understanding of this than others. Herabergen reasoned, as all of the kings of angels under the Creator had encountered Bethel long before he became an angel. It doesn't change the fact that, with his might, Bethel Abraham poses a serious threat. He has the power to entirely decimate our forces. Badheel concurred with Leodoro on this point. Indeed, this may exacerbate the situation by forcing us to deal with him directly. Ultimately, during that chaotic war, it would completely destabilize our advantage. Lilith expressed her opinions as well. Leodoro scowled when he heard Herabergen and others. What if he's someone we've met before? How long had it been since we first met him? It was back when he wasn't even an angel. It's been over 1,000 years. He can't be the same person as he was before. Leodoro immediately refuted Herabergen. However, I've heard that he frequently wanders the cosmos and rarely stays on Earth. The Bethel Abraham that we knew was the one didn't like restrictions and desired to be unrestricted and free. He even said that rather than staying here, his dream was to roam the sea of stars. Based on what I know about the events of the Solomon Empire and his position within the Solomon Empire, I believe my guess is mostly correct. After hearing that, Herabergen did not back down, instead stating all of the facts to back up his words. What you just said makes him even more dangerous. He travels the cosmos, where the outer gods are present. After everything that happened with the Blood Moon, we can clearly see that the outer gods do not lack ways to reach into our world. Leodoro exclaimed, as a tyrannical aura swept through the hall. Bethel Abraham will mostly not take Solomon's side. Amonines finally spoke up, as a serene aura spread throughout the hall, dispersing the tyrannical aura. Control your power, Leodoro. We have an angel with us. She said this as her serene aura enveloped the knelling Trunsoist, relieving him of the pressure and healing his injuries. Leodoro snorted, completely indifferent about Turnoist. Amonines, do you know anything about Bethel? Herabergen inquired after hearing her words about Bethel. However, Amonines remained strangely quiet, not answering his question. Occuses, who had been silent, previously spoke up to silence any further discussion. Let's put this discussion to rest and ask Trunsoist himself about Bethel's situation. As for Cosmos, I believe Bethel is more than capable of surviving there. He spoke calmly. His words temporarily calmed the situation, and all of the gods focused on Trunsoist, who was able to stand after being healed by Amonines. Trunsoist groaned in pain as he stood up with trembling legs. The aura of tyranny had earlier severely injured him, causing him to feel immense pain, as if his entire being had been torn apart and crushed. Even though the Evernight goddess aura provided reprieve from torture and pain, some after effects remained. Just then, a blaze of pure light fell on him, instantly alleviating all of his sequelae and restoring him to peak condition in an instant. Thank you, Your Excellency. Trunsoist bowed his head, taking a deep breath to calm himself. Despite his complicated feelings in his heart, which included a mix of hatred, fear, and helplessness, he didn't show much change on the surface, even after being treated in this manner. It's trivial, Occuses stated flatly. Now tell us about Bethel Abraham's situation. Mr. Dorr was last seen visiting the Emperor himself after Your Excellency's attack on the Empire. They had a disagreement. Trunsoist replied huskily. The Majesty was in a foul mood for a long time after the argument. Oh, Occuses raised his brows in surprise, not expecting such a turn of events. How come that was? Trunsoist looked up to eternal blazing sun, slightly perplexed, as he reasoned that even this was under the sun god's arrangement. Nonetheless, he responded immediately. It was because of the Angel of Time, Your Excellency. Mr. Dorr and Angel of Time were said to be on good terms throughout the Empire, and some even believed that they were friends. But, given their paths, I didn't believe it until Mr. Door barged into the royal palace, following the banishment of the Angel of Time. Ocuses was speechless when he heard that. He was totally unaware of this. However, this did not come as a surprise, at least not for him, because he was well acquainted with Amon's eccentric personality. What a surprise! Lilith laughed. After hearing that, Leodoro and Harabergen had strange expressions. It's unexpected, Badheel muttered in surprise. In particular, it is Amon. How about Antigonus? Evernight unexpectedly asked about him, surprised, as she looked down at Trunsoist. Antigonus is also said to be friendly with Mr. Door and the Angel of Time, but I'm not sure, milady. After a brief silence, Trunsoist responded. So it truly is. Amanine's thought. She, too, had heard about this, but she immediately dismissed this due to the absurdity of the entire situation. But after hearing Trunsoist, she wasn't sure how she felt about it. But one thing was certain. The pathways of mysteries and beyonders of that pathways never ceases to amaze her. I didn't expect the cowardly trio to be a thing. Ocuses thought amusingly, recalling memes and pictures from his previous life. However, he was also certain that, with Amon involved, their friendship was far from simple. So, where has Bethel gone? Leodoro inquired, starting at Trunsoist and putting immense pressure on the other. Your Excellency, Mr. Door was last seen entering his home, Trunsoist said cautiously, under the gaze of Lord of Storms. Despite appearances, this entire situation reveals nothing. Harabergen expressed his disapproval. Bethel Abraham is not as simple as he appears to others. The other gods were silent in agreement, and while they may have found the previous news amusing, as Harabergen pointed out, it doesn't prove anything in the end. Indeed, finally, Ocuses nodded in agreement. Bethel is a huge variable in our plan, and his intentions are still unknown to us. He paused and looked at Trunsoist. After this meeting, go to him and inform him that the 6 gods require his audience. Ocuses' voice was majestic and thunderous for Trunsoist, who was stunned by the order of the eternal blazing sun. But soon realization set in as he considered everything that had happened since meeting the Angel of Miracles. It really took him a long time to figure it out. Lilith smiled and mused. It's incredible how he managed to survive in a place like the Solomon Empire with his character. Trunsoist was jolted out of shock by Lilith's voice, and he looked around at the gods, who were all calm, as if they expected this. Yo-yo, man, he stumbled. Amon discovered my angel while meeting you. So what prevents Bethel from discovering it as well? Ocuses cut him off. However, Bethel is very different from Amon, which is why only Amon approached you. I will, Your Excellency. Trunsoist finally accepted the order while maintaining his composure. But his heart was truly overwhelmed. It was terrifying to think that his betrayal had already been revealed to others and that his fate could have already been sealed. More importantly, he couldn't comprehend the gods, particularly the eternal blazing sun, who seemed to have considered everything and nothing seemed to escape his grasps or expectations. He was terrified and saddened by the prospect of working under someone like that in the future. However, his attention was immediately drawn forward when he noticed the gods rising from their silver thrones in unison after a brief conversation and peering at him. A beam of darkness, pure light, twilight, as well as blot of lightning, a book, and finally a seed all appeared before him and struck his figure before he could react. He didn't feel any pain or discomfort, which perplexed him even more. To be honest, his emotions were on a roller coaster throughout the entire meeting with gods. Eternal, blazing sun's majestic voice echoed in the hall. We, the 6 gods, bless you, Trunsoist, for your first mission, which you will know on the day of the war. Trunsoist, you will be first to usher in the new era with your own hand. Just as you had envisioned, the era of order and justice will arrive. So, don't let us down and then regret it. Trunsoist's consciousness sank into eternal darkness before he could even process that. Chapter 46. King of Angels. After the meeting with Trunsoist, the gods were still present in the White Castle. They were talking about the angels under them and the impending war. There's a more pressing matter, Lilith said as her face became solemn. And We're avoiding it on purpose. She looked around and noticed Leodoro and Herabergen's solemn expressions, but Occus's remained indifferent. That was never going to be avoided. As he turned to face Lilith, Occus's replied, I was planning to bring it up toward the end of the meeting, but it's not a problem now either. Adam, angel of imagination. The room was filled with an unsettling silence, and the gods, who had previously seemed indifferent and nonchalant, suddenly had serious expressions. Adam is an enigma that even I can't comprehend. Herabergen spoke quietly. Truth be told, he may pose the greatest threat to our plans. Leodoro stated solemnly. Even Bethel pales in comparison, because we can understand Bethel's stance at least. But nothing is certain when it comes to Adam. Badheal agreed with a nod. Adam's goals and intentions aren't as straightforward as he made them out to be. It's quite difficult to predict his next move or position, let alone whether he will participate in the upcoming war. Adam is an unknown area even to us. Lilith observed as she spoke her opinion. I believe it's safe to say he will also be there in the impending war, Almanine said ethereally. When Adam displayed the second blasphemy slate to many in the beginning of the epic, he single-handedly guided history. So, you wouldn't want to miss such a historic event as a spectator. Her words just added to the heaviness of the situation. The gods aren't scared of angel of imagination, but Adam, like Bethel, has the capacity to undermine their advantage. Given that they're just facing two gods, it may appear to be excessive. But killing a god has never been easy. What's more, Sasfer isn't an ordinary god. Adam, finally, Occus's spoke up. He'll undoubtedly be present, as Almanine stated, if he chooses to oppose us, which I believe is quite unlikely. Even if it comes to it, I'll confront him and keep him from meddling with the war. He already knew he'd be facing Adam in the war one way or another, so it didn't matter much to him in the end. After hearing Occus's words, Lilith turned and stared at him with surprise. Others, particularly Leodoro and Herabergen, were not much better, as they hadn't expected him to say such a thing. Occus's began speaking on the remaining issues before anyone else could ask more into this. Next, Medici and Ouroboros. The gods finally put their doubts and questions aside and focused on this after noticing his intentions. Ouroboros, Lilith pondered. The little guy, will is enough, face Ouroboros. She smiled as she thought of Will. Yes. Herabergen concurred with Lilith. I believe it is past time for that snake of Mercury to repay us for the asylum we granted him. Will Septon was nearly killed by the true creator and Ouroboros when they managed to save him, then granted him asylum. He frequently assisted the angels of their churches in dealing with various external matters in order to repay them. However, until now, the six gods had not directly demanded anything to him. Ouroboros is a king of angels who lacks uniqueness. Will should be more than enough to face him, Badheal said, nodding. In accord, Leodoro and Almanines remained silent. So it's settled. After listening to their opinions, Occus's pulled out a golden parchment from nowhere. The order for Will Septon was written on the parchment, which they had just discussed. He took a seal from his pocket and pressed it into the parchment. A golden sun insignia appeared on the edge of the parchment when he removed the seal. The golden parchment then vanished in a flash of light, having been sent to Diana by Occus's. Medici is different. As he watched Occus's finish, Leodoro finally said something. In war, no one below the gods and kings of angels can stand a chance against him. Even if a large number of angels were to besiege him, they would just perish under his sword. Herabergen agreed with a nod with Leodoro on this, as they knew Medici better than the others. On the battlefield, his madness is unrivaled. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to state that he has left nothing but destruction in his wake. Medici is indeed a bit tricky. Occus's stated in vague terms. But leave it to me to handle this. I've already have someone to deal with him. Are you referring to the new knowledge emperor under you? Lilith inquired, surprised, for she had deduced this from his words. Yes. With a nod, Occus confirmed it. You are sending your archangel to death. With a frown, Badheal muttered to Occus. Because he and Occus are allies, he didn't hesitate to express his thoughts on the matter. I understand, Badheal, Arcusis smiled. However, I am aware of what I am doing. He'd already planned a strategy for Medici and Diana. He will not send her to death. The Knowledge Emperor's power is complex, and he has already taught Diana how to fully utilize it. He will also bless her with the uniqueness of a hermit, which may help her even more in the battle. Badheal sighed and abandoned his attempt to persuade Arcusis. I only hope your plan didn't screw up in the end, Arcusis. Leotaro chastised. We can't afford any more chaos. Arcusis ignored him and turned to face Ammonizes, who was staring at him deeply. What's the deal with her? He was puzzled, but she gradually averted her gaze, as if nothing had happened. Nonetheless, he drew his attention back to the important situation rather than thinking about her. Most of the issues within Solomon Empire have now been considered by us. Arcusis finished as he looked around. Only Bethel Abraham is left, so we'll have to wait a few more days. If he declines our order for his audience, we will still go ahead with our plans without any change. You think he'll say no? Leotaro was amazed. It's actually rather possible. Lilith mused. Bethel Abraham could certainly do so. Arcusis gave a nod. If it comes to that, I will personally go and meet him while ensuring his position in the war. More importantly, Bethel Abraham will not be welcomed in the new empire that emerges. He said indifferently. He's not going to let Bethel off the hook if he refuses even this. For them, the situation is already far too dire. Arcusis continued in a light tone, after taking their silence as agreement. Let us now move on to the final issue. Salinger and Cheek. Chapter 47, Death and Demonis Salinger. Gods focused first on the god of death, and then looked at Ammonines and Badheal, as they might the only ones to have more knowledge about death. Arcusis also recalled everything he knew about Salinger. To become a sequence 0 for the death pathway, one must first construct an underworld and become the sole ruler of all spirits and the dead. Even though death pathway rituals for advancement eventually lay the foundation for the underworld, it is still not an easy to completely this apotheosis ritual. The ancient goddess of death, who built the underworld, was only able to complete it because she had some authority over the door, which aided her immensely. Then, ancient sun god invaded the underworld at the end of the second epoch. He let the light shine on the dark underworld, destroying almost the entire underworld and leaving only the Calderon city and ruins behind. During the war, the ancient goddess of death also died under the light of the ancient sun god, and the one who inherited her characteristics and uniqueness was Salinger, as he was her subsidiary god at that time. Salinger used these characteristics to rise to the position of King of Angels at the end of the third epoch. He also joined Rose Redemption and took part in the final war. After the fall of the ancient sun god, he conquered the southern continent and established the Balaam Empire. For the sake of balance at the time, Solomon also did not attack or conquer the southern continent. This alone ensured that Salinger faced no opposition to his rule over the southern continent. After knowing all of the future events, Arcusis had some ideas about how Salinger managed to ascend to godhood. Not long after him, at the start of the fourth epoch, Salinger ascended to become death. Before that, Ammonines and Badheal both declared open war on Salinger. After all, it's much easier for them to kill a king of angels than to face each other. Under their combined pressure and assault, Salinger was forced to ascend because it was the only way he could survive. Arcusis guessed that Salinger should have used the ruins of the underworld as a foundation for his own. Other than this, he didn't have many options to speak off. Arcusis also knew things couldn't be that simple. The ancient goddess of death must have left behind plans for her resurrection in her underworld, which Salinger should have foiled. But this didn't really matter much in the end. Salinger ascended to become death. He completely changed after that, as wars continued to erupt between them. Unlike Badheal and Ammonines, who personally went to the battlefield, Salinger was never seen again. Through his spies in Biome, Arcusis had some knowledge of Salinger's situation. Salinger was said to rarely leave the underworld. He even recently appointed his son, Azek Eggers, as his ruler of his kingdom and retreated to the underworld completely. Others may find this situation perplexing, but Ocuses finds it to be otherwise. He is certain that this entire Salinger situation involves the river of eternal darkness. If it involves that, even he can't pry any further. Ocuses will also never allow Salinger to live past the War of Four Emperors, because he knows what exactly happened in the future. He will ensure that death itself dies. Ocuses put his jumbled thoughts aside when he heard Badheel speak up. Badheel reflected. There's not much news about Salinger after he became a god. Despite the fact that we had conflicts, he never came to the battlefield. Given the presence of Ammonines in the war, I also did not invade his kingdom after his absence. Despite the presence of Ammonines here, he did not hesitate to state the facts clearly. The most recent thing I heard about him was that he appointed his son as Emperor of Byam and even gave him complete control over the Byam Empire itself. Salinger has an eccentric personality, that for sure. Leotaro mused. However, I think it's unlikely that he would dare to involve himself in matters of Northern Continent. He dismissed death with a casual wave of his hand, as if Salinger was nothing. Oh, if only he knew. Ocuses found it amusing as he thought of the future. Herabergen and Lilith remained silent about death. They turned to look at Ammonizes, hoping for her to speak. After some silence, Ammonine said slowly, "We don't have to be that concerned about his participation in the upcoming war. Despite the fact that Salinger's situation is unclear in general, I am fairly certain that Salinger has fallen asleep." Despite having more wild assumptions, she did not elaborate further. She also very much hopes that her speculations will turn out to be false. "Sleep?" Leotaro inquired, perplexed. What could have pushed him into that? Ocuses intervened just in time to prevent this conversation from continuing. "It's no longer relevant, Leotaro, but at the very least, we can be somewhat certain that Salinger will not intervene in the upcoming war," he concluded, as Leotaro fixed his angry gaze on him. While Badheel was heavy, Herabergen's starry eyes twinkled and his expression was thoughtful, and Lilith remained calm. "Now let's move on to Cheek," Ocuses continued, ignoring Leotaro once more, much to his chagrin. "I think it's safe to say," Lilith stated, "after the war, there will be another god. The conditions for the apotheosis ritual for the Demonis arrive completely with the war." Herabergen said calmly, "Cheek will not pass up this opportunity." "Indeed," Ocuses nodded. "As a result, we'll keep an eye out for her. If the circumstances permit, we can interfere with her ritual, as ascension of Cheek will undoubtedly result in calamity second only to cataclysm. However, if things don't improve, let her ascend to godhood, because we already have a lot on our plates. We can deal with the Cheek later, as well as the aftermath of her ascension." Other than that, there was nothing else they could do. To be honest, Ocuses wants Cheek to ascend to godhood. If he can get her on his side during the War of the Four Emperors, it will help him a lot. As for Cheek becoming an evil god among the world in the future, he couldn't care less. There's no such thing as good and evil for gods. There was only silence among the gods after he said that, and Ocuses took their silence for agreement and then waved his hand, and a golden parchment appeared before him. The golden parchment emitted a terrifying aura that even archangels may not be able to bear. Alliance of Six Gods. The heading was boldly written at the top of the golden parchment. It also contained a number of articles. Ocuses took out a golden quill and poured his authority into it before signing his name on the end of parchment. "Pass it on." The gods also signed their names after carefully reading and observing it. However, Leotaro was dissatisfied after reading some articles that imposed many restrictions, but he still signed it reluctantly after seeing everyone else do so. Ocuses finally obtained the golden parchment bearing the signatures and authorities of six gods and gazed at it for a while. Finally, he declared, in the light of the sun, "Let the angels blow the horns of war." The next day, as the northern continent descended into complete chaos, a handsome man appeared out of thin air in front of Ontal Mountains, with prim facial features and hair which exerts a blackness that rivals the void, with a small amount of white hairs mixed in. His eyes are cerulean blue, with irises that resemble layers upon layers of rippling cerulean waves stacked on top of one another. The man took out his pocket watch and checked the time. He then spoke with a smile. Ocus's eternal blazing sun, Ammoniz's evernight goddess. Then he proceeded to recite all 6 gods' honorific names. And most importantly, he did not forget to call out the gods' names as well. Chapter 48. Corruption. As the man finished reciting the gods' names, a dreadful aura descended. Instead of blue sky, the white clouds that had blanketed the sky had blown away, revealing the boundless cosmos. The 6 gods appeared in front of the man, their mountain-sized figures staring down at the man who dared to utter their names. Bethel Abraham. Leodoro grumbled. Can you give me one good reason why I shouldn't attack you right way for daring to call our names? Bethel Abraham looked at the gods that floated before him, unaffected by their divine gazes and auras. He then focused on Leodoro and reasoned calmly. You were all the first to request an audience. So, other than calling your names, how can I hope to catch your attention? Do you expect me to knock on the doors of all your divine kingdoms? He stated it with a shrug and a smile on his lips. Don't try to be clever around us. As terrifying blots of lightning flashed across Leodoro's figure, his voice became indifferent. Other gods simply stood on the sidelines and looked on in silence. Enough, Ocuses said while glaring at Leodoro. We're already out of time. Leodoro, there must be no more mishaps or chaos. When Leodoro heard Ocuses, he snorted, but the lightning that had flashed across his body had vanished. Bethel Abraham gazed at the sun god that floated before him, and just by looking at him, he felt the immense authority and power that other possessed. He even had the feeling that he was looking at a literal sun surrounded by an infinite ocean of light. His calmness faded, gradually being replaced by solemnity. He was well aware that the sun god he was facing was no ordinary deity. The sun god also gave him a strange and frightening feeling, similar to how he felt when he first met the ancient sun god in Ammonizes. Bethel's mind was racing with questions. He'd met Ocuses before, back in the 3rd epoch, but hadn't felt the same way. He didn't know if his sequence level was too low at the time to perceive anything, but he also met the ancient sun god in Ammonizes not long after. So he couldn't put his finger on this entire situation, which confused him more. Bethel Abraham. Ocuses said, state your position in the war. Think twice before responding to us, though. A white spear appeared in his hand, and he looked at the Bethel projection indifferently. Bethel is not physically present. He would have been a literal fool if he had arrived to meet us in his true body. For you cannot bear the consequences of a wrong choice, as no one has survived being on the wrong side of history. So, Bethel, make a wise choice. His majestic voice reverberated in the air. Despite witnessing Ocuses' spear in his hands, Bethel kept his composure. Ocuses' words, or more accurately, threat, resonated in his ears. I come in peace. He spoke after a brief silence, as if he had been contemplating. I will stand alongside you all in the ongoing war and assist Trunsoist when the time comes. Ocuses put away his spear and said indifferently, Bethel, state your demands. In the new era, I demand a standing equal to 6 of you. Bethel stated his demands with solemnity. Silence. Ammonizes were taken aback by Bethel's demand, and others weren't much better. Insolence. A tyrannical aura pressed over Bethel, causing him to shudder for a brief period before returning to normal. Bethel Abraham, know your place, Leodoro exclaimed, as the entire continent under them quaked, signifying his wrath. The entire northern continent began to quake more, but Lilith waved her hand just in time to stop it. Your power cannot change the facts, Herabergen said in solemn voice. You're only king of angels, Bethel Abraham, not a god. You cannot ask for such audacious demands. Actually, Herabergen can see that after Bethel's bold demand is denied, he would soon follow up with his actual and true one. It's merely a tried and true tactic. Nonetheless, his first demand was utterly out of his league. Even if another god were there in his place, they would not make such a demand. On Bethel Abraham's glabella, there was an illusory blue symbol that looked like doors stacked on top of each other, which allowed him to somewhat resist Leodaro's tyrannical aura. Abraham Bethel heard the god's words but was unmoved by them, focusing entirely on Ocuses. No, Ocuses eventually denied his demands. Bethel wasn't surprised. Now he intended to convey Ocuses his true demands. The eternal blazing sun, on the other hand, smiled as he interpreted him. How about this, Bethel Abraham? You can be free from the new empire's order and rules, exactly as you've always desired. You are, nevertheless, still under us. Before leaving for the cosmos, you must notify us at all times. This is the best we can do for you. The gods looked at Bethel as their divine aura exploded from them, crushing down on him and exerting great pressure. As he heard the offer, Bethel fell silent, and the symbol of the door on his glabella darkened due to the aura of 6 gods pressing on him. When the sun god interrupted him, he realized he had completely lost his advantage. He is now unable of making counterdemands in this scenario. It appears that I have changed a lot without even realizing it, he thought. His perception of world completely changed as he traveled through the cosmos and saw the immense civilizations there, as well as the outer gods that pray and rule the cosmos. So, when he made the first demand, he didn't think much of it because, even if he isn't God, he is close. All he has to do now is finish the ritual. The gods, he reasoned, would not be angered because they could all see the truth. Bethel's lips pressed together in a thin line as he realized he couldn't take the aura of 6 gods any longer. He finally nodded. I accept. However, neither Ocuses nor the other gods noticed a weird flash of crimson light over Bethel's blue eyes. Ironically, even Bethel himself didn't notice anything was wrong. The next day, Northern Continent, no man's land. The once uninhabited border between the Solomon Empire and the 6 kingdoms is now dyed with fire and blood. Dark and gloomy clouds blanketed the sky, with scarlet and blue lightning striking each other from time to time. A mythical war was taking place in the midst of it all, with a towering fire giant slashing at 2 angles with a sword that was bathing in the fire. A black-haired woman dressed in an ascetic robe wielded a bone-white blade that seemed to radiate pure darkness, her countenance serious as she saw a blazing sword approaching her. A man dressed in white armor stood next to her, blonde hair and brilliant eyes. He glided close to her with 2 white wings on his back and a sword that shined with light on his sword. Lucas, the angel of light, and Selena, the angel of concealment, were the 2 angels. They were facing an angel of Red Division of Empire Army, which served the war angel himself. And this was just one of the battles across the no man's land. Let's attack together, Lucas shouted, his golden eyes sparkling, indicating that he had no intention of backing down. Selena only replied with a simple nod. Serena's body faded and entered a concealed state. Then she reappeared behind the giant, slashing at him with her bone sword. Lucas also slashed out his white sword at the massive sword of fire that was descending towards him. On the battlefield, a massive sword slash of light and darkness appeared. Boom! When the light slash collided with the burning sword, a burst of light and fire erupted across the battlefield, destroying everything in its path. Meanwhile, the flame giant was completely distracted by the explosion, allowing the slash of the darkness to entirely land on the giant's back. Roar! Boom! The fire giant roared in pain as it crashed to the ground, unable to keep its balance after being attacked by 2 angels. While looking at the flaming giant, Selena and Lucas landed on the earth. The flame giant was hurt, but not killed. If they want to slay the flame giant, they had to fully unleash their mythical creature form, exactly like the flame giant, and use all of their strength. Selena shifted her gaze to Lucas, intending to speak with him about the situation. Just then, before they could even react, a flash of red light emerged out of nowhere and passed through their necks. Selena's head separated from her neck and plummeted to the ground. Gushing blood erupted from the severed neck, splashing all around. Lucas's face was splashed with crimson blood, and his eyes were filled with terror and dread. He was too shocked to realize that just as the red light neared his neck, his entire body turned into pure light, saving him from certain death. "Oh!" In the battlefield, an eerie voice echoed. "I never anticipated Ocuses to be so concerned about his angels." It's rather ironic. As the voice ended, a man emerged from the red blaze of flames, wielding a crimson sword, the tip of which hung down to the earth. He was dressed in black armor that seemed to be splashed with blood. He had red hair that resembled fire, looking young and handsome. The red sword continued to be dragged across the battlefield as the red-haired man marched ahead, causing the earth to be ripped apart with bursts of crimson flames. Lucas was totally paralyzed in terror and the vicious aura emanating from the red-haired man, who grabbed his chin and forced him to gaze straight into the other's crimson eyes. "Let's see if killing you causes anguish to Ocuses." With a crazy smile, the red-haired man said. When he mentioned the name of the eternal blazing sun, though his eyes glowed with hatred. Chapter 49. Medici Lucas was terrified. No, it was too underwhelming to put it that way. Just being close to the man paralyzed him to the core, his thoughts slowing and consciousness clouding by the minute. He desperately tried to use his remaining strength, but his illusions were quickly shattered as he felt the heavy aura pressing down on him like a mountain, rendering him unable to move any part of his body. He felt his chin being grabbed, and his gaze met the red-haired man's crimson eyes. Everything in his vision slowly faded into darkness, but the crimson eyes remained, haunting him. In the crimson eyes, he saw reddish fires burning brightly like stars, illuminating the darkness. He began to see visions in which the red-haired man left nothing but disaster in his wake. Mountains of corpses of mythical creatures lay on the battlefield as the red-haired man sat on top of it covered in blood. Yet the craziness and madness in his eyes and smile didn't fade despite the scene before him. It went on and on. He saw innumerable battles of the red-haired man, and his mind went almost insane, unable to stand it any longer. The visions didn't end, though. They kept coming back. The frightening visions repeated over and over in his mind, seeking to dismantle him into the last of his pieces. His consciousness became blurry, and he felt as if he were falling down at the last moment. Then his blurry vision saw the dark river flowing with no beginning or end toward which he was falling. Is this it? His entire life flashed before his eyes in the last moments, finally focusing on 3 pictures, one of which was him swearing his loyalty to his lord, another was him dancing with Diana in the ball, and finally, it was him smiling with Diana, Blaze, and Edward while enjoying the holidays that we rarely got. In the end, he felt regret and pain. "I'm sorry, Diana. I broke my promise." When his figure arrived just before the dark river, a burst of pure light erupted from the void, illuminating the entire darkness. It also submerged him completely. In the battlefield, a terrifying aura of destruction erupted, freezing everything across the no-man's land. The blots of crimson and blue lightning that had been colliding in dark clouds against each other vanished as if erased, as did the majority of the angels' attacks across the battlefield. The angels felt suffocating aura covers everything around them, as screams of the pain and terror sounded everywhere. Medici looked up with interest as he swatted Lucas away, causing the other to fly across and crash into the ground, leaving a trail of blood before stopping. Lucas' eyes were closed, blood streaming from them, and his face was as pale as a corpse, while he was completely motionless as if he died. But his chest, on the other hand, moved up and down weakly, implying otherwise. An ancient spear blazed towards Medici, annihilating everything in its path, including matter itself. The spear was dyed crimson from tip to handle, and it emitted a horrifying aura of destruction, as though it could harm even a true deity. Spear of Longinus. This spear had once appeared in an ancient era that couldn't be traced back, stained with the blood of a great existence. Through mythical reenactment, it has now descended into no man's land. The arrival of the legendary spear absolutely threw the entire war into disarray. At long last, something interesting, Medici spoke as his smile grew frenzied. His figure erupted with terrifying bloodlust, instantly covered the entire no man's land. He cast a glance at the approaching ancient spear before raising his sword and pointing at the sky. The entire cloudy sky was lit up with crimson light, which could be seen across the northern continent. Medici then swung his sword down directly at the ancient spear. Boom! A blot of crimson lightning descended from the crimson sky, submerging the ancient spear with enough power to make the Tsar bomb look like firecrackers. Boom! A terrifying explosion ensued, forming a semi-sphere of chaotic energy that pulsated visibly, as if it possessed limitless power and was poised to leave nothing but total annihilation in its wake. Seeing this, Medici merely waved his hands as crimson flames erupted around the semi-sphere of energy, completely submerging and consuming it within. Just then, a flash of light appeared behind Medici, forming a sword and trying to stab him in the back. Medici smirked as he turned back in an instant before the sword could reach him and grabbed the sword with his bare hands while looking at women in black armor. "Oh," Medici said, his voice surprised. "I didn't expect to see such an act of love after all this time." The angels of Ocuses are full of surprises. He spoke while looking at Lucas, who was surrounded by purple light and teleporting away from the battlefield. Diana, the angel of wisdom, is the woman in black armor. "You bastard!" Diana roared, her eyes filled with rage, and she didn't hesitate to grab the sword even tighter the next second after her attack failed. The sword in their hands broke apart into fundamental blocks of information, which immediately went to Medici's mind. Diana, on the other hand, did not hesitate to attack again. She attempted to instill a vast amount of useless knowledge and miscellaneous information into Medici's mind. She didn't hold back, either out of rage at seeing Lucas in that state or knowing she was facing a man who had fought side by side with her lord in the past. However, all illusory information, whether it came from the sword or was sent by Diana, was set ablaze with crimson flames. The crimson flames completely burned the information itself, destroying it. Medici said with a grin, his crimson eyes glowed. "It's my turn now." While continuing, he looked up at the crimson sky. "So, what are you going to do now to save your precious little lover?" Boom! A blot of crimson lightning fell from the sky, slashing right at the figure of Lucas, whose teleportation had been completely disrupted by Medici's tampering with the spirit world, which rendered all spirit world travel useless across the battlefield. "No!" Diana screamed as she saw the lightning, her eyes filled with panic and fear. She didn't hesitate to use her most powerful move. At that precise moment, Medici appeared in front of Diana, filling the other's eyes with horror. Slap! A resounding slap echoed across no man's land. Medici slapped her away before she could even perform her supposedly powerful move. Diana felt the entire world before her spin, and she felt light. Everything in her vision was moving so fast that it took her a moment to realize what had happened. However, it was already too late. She felt her vision become cloudy and her mouth fill with blood as she used her last remaining strength to only see the crimson lightning descending on Lucas in the distance. "Lucas!" Her heart-wrenching roar echoed across the battlefield. Chapter 50, Conqueror 10 minutes ago. In an army camp on the outskirts of No Man's Land. The No Man's Land is a stretch of land between the Solomon Empire and the Six Kingdoms that has become uninhabitable and dangerous due to years of incessant warfare and battles. In the center of the camp, people were seen discussing inside a large tent, in front of a table with an illusory display that realistically showed everything happening in No Man's Land. This was one of Artisan's inventions, which he personally sent to the Alliance of Six Gods to express his goodwill to the Six Gods. While an old man could be seen meditating on the corner of the tent, the man was Horus, angel under the god of knowledge and wisdom. He was in charge of communicating directly with the gods and relaying their instructions to angels here. 4 angels have already fallen on your side, while only 2 have fallen on the Empire's side. On the second day of the war, we are already at a disadvantage. The angels of the Solomon Empire's nobles' families have already joined the war. Augustus and Zeridal family angels are already battling us in the second and third sectors of no man's land. We just learned that another has died. The entire situation within the tent was chaotic, as angels of 6 gods kept discussing and arguing with each other. This would be a disaster for us if the battle only remained in no man's land. We should launch a frontal assault with all of our troops. A man in blue robes declared, as lightning flashed across his fingers. Are you crazy? Israel. The entire Solomon Empire is enveloped in the twisted rules of the Black Emperor. The moment we enter the empire, our fate is sealed. A black-haired man in a silver suit refuted, while pointing to the Empire projection on the table. They were Blaze Larson, Angel of Miracles, and Israel, Angel of Calamity. The gods are on our side, Blaze, Israel said, as he glared at Blaze. The other angels in the tent went silent as they turned to face them. Blaze said, pointing up, the gods above are watching everything that happens here. If they had wanted that, they already have told us so. Don't let your emotions get the best of you, Israel. Blaze approached him and gently advised. Not only have you lost some on the battlefield now, but many more are falling as we speak. Israel remained silent, his blue eyes gleaming as he gazed at Blaze, and sparks of lightning extended from his fingers, covering his figure. As he looked at this, Blaze's eyes were indifferent. His right hand, however, had been inside his pocket at some point. He and Israel never liked each other, and even though they are now allies, it cannot erase the fact that they were enemies who fought against each other for the glory of their lords for long times. What are you two doing? Stop right now. Other angels stepped in right away to stop them. Despite this, neither of them moved away in the least. Enough! A flat yet powerful voice rang out, capturing their attention and making them to look at the entrance. A black-haired woman in an amour stood with a few scrolls in her hands. Diana, Angel of Wisdom. Diana looked at them all and then spoke up, her voice clear and loud. You're all misinterpreting the entire war. This war was never intended for us. We will not invade the Solomon Empire. This has always been a war of gods. Diana stepped forward to clarify the situation. Not every god is particularly concerned with his or her angels. Their instructions from the other gods were vague, only stating that they should hold the no man's land and nothing else. This was also one of the source of the current crisis. They had no idea what to do next and were completely perplexed. There was only silence in the tent as the angels digested the information. Diana wanted to continue, but just then, a divine aura descended on the tent. The old man in the corner, who was meditating, opened his eyes, which were filled with light rather than irises. The old man turned to face Diana, ignoring all the angels. Diana knew who was staring at her, as the only one who could speak through Horus was God of knowledge and wisdom. In the tent, a distant voice echoed. Medici has entered the war. Without waiting for a response, the divine aura receded and the old man closed his eyes, returning to his meditative state, but his complexion was much paler. Diana didn't think twice after hearing that, bolting out of the tent, completely ignoring the angel's questions. Wait a second, Diana. She paused and turned to face Blaze, who had followed her out of the tent. You are not joining me. Blaze, Diana stated sternly, without giving him the opportunity to speak first. The war angel is king of angels, but more importantly, he is a conqueror. You will be completely paralyzed by his mere presence and lose all will to fight. A conqueror is a terrifying existence, and their mere presence ensures victory during a war. They can use their authority to turn someone into a puppet, robbing others of their free will. They also have the ability to easily manipulate emotions, which can be detrimental in war. Their abilities reel Ted to war goes on and on. She continued after noticing Blaze's unwavering determination. I know Lucas is out there on the battlefield. I promise he'll be fine. Diana, listen to me. Blaze yelled, finally silencing her. You'll need me for that. The Holy Sword. When you are in a critical situation, You cannot visualize that sword using authority of knowledge in an instant. It would place an enormous burden on you and will take time, during which you would be completely vulnerable to an attack. Diana, you need me at that precise moment. Diana hesitated, knowing what Blaze said was true. However, she prepared a plan for that, in which both she and Septon would enter the battlefield together to face the King of Angels and cover for each other at that time. Will, on the other hand, had recently been summoned by their lord, and she had no idea when he would return. Lucas was on the battlefield, so she couldn't wait any longer. As she thought of Luke, she had the uneasy feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Occus's voice appeared in their minds, just as she was about to agree to Blaze. Blaze, you will be taking over the mission that Lucas was assigned. When Blaze and Diana heard their lord, they were taken aback. Then, Blaze nodded, though he was reluctant in his heart. Don't worry, by the end of the day, everyone will be fine. Occus's reassuring voice echoed in their minds once more. He didn't wait for their response, as a beam of pure light descended on their figures, teleporting them to different locations via the medium of light. The six gods sat at the same white table in the divine kingdom of Occus's, watching projections, which displayed the battlefield in no man's land. Then, they all saw the spear of Longinus descending on the battlefield. Leodoro and Herabergen were surprised, while Ammonize's eyes behind the gauze were complex. Is that mythical reenactment or authority of knowledge? Leodoro asked Occus's, as he wanted to confirm personally to him. Mythical reenactment, Occus's said, his clear eyes still fixed on Medici and Lucas on the screen. I've always assumed that the majority of the stories told by the creator were purely fictitious. Herabergen couldn't hide his surprise. Based on this, he has already begun to plan on creating new techniques. Occus's recalled, after hearing Herabergen and Leodoro, the ancient sun god did indeed tell them about the legend of Longinus' spear, but he left out many details and gave them a hazy account. He understands why ancient sun god said it that way. That spear of Longinus directly involved God Almighty. The spear was entirely real in this world, not a work of fiction. Occus's knows this because Bernadette summoned this spear using mythical reenactment in the original future. He also only told Diana the hazy version given by the ancient sun god. He already knew that anything involving a pillar was extremely dangerous, and this thought only reinforced what had happened before. So he didn't dare to tell Diana the entire mythology. He also had inkling that if he had done that, something catastrophic would have occurred. Occus's attention was drawn back to the projection by Leodoro's laugh. Medici is still the same. Leodoro laughed louder while glaring at Occus's. I warned you before, Occus's. Badheel sighed. The screen showed Medici slapping Diana away. While his gaze remained fixed on the screen, Occus's ignored Leodoro and said, They'll be fine, on the battlefield, just as the crimson lightning was about to fall on the figure of Lucas. The clouds in the sky were swept away, revealing a massive, illusory, scaleless snake. The dense patterns and symbols on the surface of the gigantic silver snake formed a wheel that was connected to each other. Around each wheel were different symbols. With a sweep of its cold, bright red eyes, the massive serpent floated above the battlefield, curling its body and biting its own tail. Its shadow covered the entire battlefield like a mysterious and ludicrous wheel. Reboot. Chapter 51. Probability. Just as the red lightning was about to strike Lucas, it froze in its path. For a brief moment, it appeared as if time had stopped. Then, the lightning began to fade away, receding to the crimson clouds from where it descended. The blood in Lucas's eyes stopped flowing, and the wounds on his body began to heal at an astonishing rate. Lucas' face livened up and his fingers twitched. His brows trembled as he slowly opened his eyes. Suddenly, he stood up from the ground. He opened his mouth wide and let out a big gasp for air. His eyes were still filled with a kaleidoscope of emotions, including panic, regret, dread, and fear. I'm alive. I'm still alive. How? He kept gazing about as jumbled thoughts flashed in his head, only flinching backwards instinctively, when he noticed the terrible man who had been haunting him was staring at him with a sneer. A sliver of light flashed across his vision, revealing a teenage lad with silver hair dressed in a white linen shirt and black trousers. Well, Septon, Snake of Mercury, Will ignored Medici and reached into his pocket for a charm with a sun emblem. Then, he placed it on Lucas's forehead, while looking at the other's confused expression. Light. The charm released a dazzling light that enveloped Lucas and instantly teleporting him to the divine kingdom of eternal blazing sun. Before, Will rebooted Lucas, returning him to his previous state before to his encounter with the Medici. It saved him from imminent death. Surprisingly, Medici did not intervene and instead gazed up at the dark sky. He said with a malicious smirk, "Your preparations and arrangements are truly spectacular, Ocuses, but you're still a long way from our Lord." With his words, the sky above the battlefield lighted up with silver light as an angel descended from the sky. The angel was clad in silver robes and had 6 silver wings. His red vertical eyes were always apathetic. In his clasped hands, the angel held an inverted cross with a frightening aura of degeneration. Ouroboros, the tail devourer. Under the mutual agreement between the two sides, the gods will not intervene in this conflict between angels. But it doesn't mean they can't use loopholes to their advantage. Ouroboros descended on the battlefield as his apathetic gaze traveled across Medici and Will. Medici approached Ouroboros and stood near him, while raising his sword and resting it on his shoulders. "By joining this war, you dug your own grave, little snake." Medici gave Will a contemptuous scowl. Will didn't respond to Medici as his solemn gaze was fixed on the inverted cross in Ouroboros' hands. "Medici," Ouroboros muttered flatly as he stared at Medici. "This is my fight. Go deal with the Knowledge Emperor." He didn't wait for Medici to respond before approaching Will. "Will Septon, this is the end of it all," Ouroboros said indifferently. With his words, reality became hazy and blurry, and everything fell into darkness. In this never-ending darkness, Ouroboros and Will floated. Soon, a faint and illusory sound echoed from the darkness as a colorless river appeared and flowed. With them, in the middle of it all, the river of destiny. The 1,000-year chase is over. Fate itself favors me, Will. You shall fall. Yeah, the same old. Fate indeed always favors you, Ouroboros, Will interputed rudely while nodding his head. "So, shall we proceed? I really need to go and get to the buckets of ice cream that Ocuses promised me after this fight," he added, a nonchalant smile on his face. For a brief moment, Ouroboros' expression froze before returning to normal. "What always gives you such confidence?" he asked indifferently as his eyes glowed with silver light. Will's eyes also began to glow with silver light, and a golden sun symbol appeared on his glabella. "Fate indeed favors you, Ouroboros. But, unlike you, I have never surrendered to fate. So that's it," Ouroboros realized as soon as he saw the sun emblem on Will. Ocuses, or Will must have known this was going to happen, and Ocuses must have blessed him in the end. However, neither the sun nor Will's words created any waves in the heart of the Ouroboros. At the end of the day, this is a fight between them, and their own authority will determine who wins. Ouroboros declared as he pointed the inverted cross in his hands at Will. "Let's put an end to it all, Will Septon." A black ocean descended between them, with an aura of filth and degeneration, as the waves in the ocean swept towards Will like tsunamis. Will exclaimed by opening his arms wide. "Praise the sun!" A blinding golden sun rose before him. Scorching rays of the light erupted from the sun and collided with the black ocean. Boom! The reality itself broke like shards of mirror at point of collision. The sun's rays began to melt the black ocean's waves, while the black ocean of filth churned with aura of degeneration, causing the blinding sun to dim. As the light and darkness continued to collide, there was soon an unsettling balance between them, with no side gaining an advantage. Will and Ouroboros, on the other hand, also erupted with a terrifying aura that collided with one another, causing the entire river of destiny around them to become restless. The authority that the snake of Mercury possesses enables them to manipulate probability. The entire war between them has now evolved into a contest over who has more control over the probabilities of victory. It's a battle of wills and fates. This is the stakes for both of them. The one who has the most control over probabilities of victory will triumph in the end, and the gods' authority, which are currently balanced, will collapse and annihilate the loser. While the War of Fates was taking place in another space, Medici was walking calmly towards the ruins of the mountains that formed as a result of that girl being slammed into it by his slap. He knew she was still alive and was probably planning her big move. He wasn't going to interfere with her right now because he wanted to see what she had and if it could reignite the long-lost excitement of battle within him. He couldn't find any suitable opponents in this era, so he's hoping the Angel of Ocuses doesn't let him down. He also has a strange feeling that the Battle of the Snake will be more difficult than he had anticipated. He was unconcerned about Ouroboros' safety, however, because he believed in his lord's might and that even if something goes wrong, Ouroboros will be fine in the end. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed as his smile broadened in excitement. Rumble. As though an earthquake had struck the northern continent, the entire no man's land rumbled. From the ruins of mountains, an aura of hope and glory emerged. Boom! A pillar of golden light erupted, directly piercing into the sky. The brilliance of the pillar shone all over the world. Medici noticed something extraordinary in the radiance of the pillar. He saw the nostalgic, sorrowful, and hallowed dreams of those who were placed on the bloody hell known as a battlefield, of all warriors past, present, and future who were fully exposed to the fear of death and despair, and who still clung to a desire to be exalted. Finally, he heard a roar that seemed to reverberate throughout the world. Chapter 52. Worthy, a golden sword emerged from the pillar of light, trailed by a woman in black armor, who floated just behind the holy sword. The holy radiance of the golden sword gleamed brightly like a golden star, illuminating the entire world. The golden sword cannot be described as beautiful because the term beautiful will only tarnish it. Instead, it is sacred, created from people's imaginations, a legend woven entirely from hope. It is the manifestation of the prayer named Glory. It's the holy sword wielded by King Arthur, Altria Pendragon. It was made by the planet as the crystallization of mankind's wishes, which had been stored and tempered within it. Excalibur, the sword of promised victory. With the authority of knowledge and the blessings of eternal blazing sun, Diana Knight visualized this god-forged sword. But, as the saying goes, nothing is free. Diana floated in front of the hold sword, a kaleidoscope of emotions flashing across her eyes before settling into determination. She knew what was going to happen next, and it could very well be the end of her, but she didn't back down or hesitate. She raised her hand and grasped the handle of the holy sword in full view of the entire world. Hope, dream, glory, wishes. Diana felt an enormous weight on her shoulders. It was the heaviest thing she had ever felt. It was as if the entire world was pressing down on her shoulders. She heard the whispers of countless people across various epochs. Their wishes and hopes poured into her head like an avalanche, completely submerging her. Ah! She screamed in agony as her hands, which held the holy sword, erupted in golden flames that began to melt her fingers. Her face twisted in anguish, and blood began to pour from her eyes and nose, while her body trembled. She managed to regain some of her consciousness, which was still cloudy due to the whispers, through sheer willpower. She immediately used authority of knowledge to process the wishes and hopes that were filling her mind. Then, Diana saw countless visions in her mind, ranging from the dark era to the age of the gods. She witnessed it all, the hopes and dreams of those fallen. Then, she saw the magnificence of human civilization across the eons. Everything was laid out in front of her like a spectacular play. She witnessed the hope and glory in it, and now she carries everything on her shoulders. It wouldn't be wrong to say she's carrying the entire world on her shoulders. This is the cost of envisioning the holy sword. She will lose herself if she cannot bear it, but if she can, she will be worthy to hold the Excalibur. But Diana started losing herself gradually as the weight of the world pressed against her shoulders and mind. The only thing keeping her going was her willpower to never give up. Soon, she couldn't take it any longer, as terrifying whispers tortured her. Even her authority couldn't handle the hope any longer. But she still didn't let go of the sword, keeping a firm grip on it. She promised her lord that everything would be fine, and she will keep her word, despite his previous warnings about this sword. No, I can't, she desperately thought, as consciousness were fading away. Diana's body was set ablaze by golden flames that spread from her hands, touching the sword in the reality. Meanwhile, Diana saw nothing but endless darkness through her hazy vision, and the whispers vanished, leaving everything silent. However, this made no difference to her situation at the end. Then, she saw a river in the darkness, and despite the lack of light around her, she could clearly see the river flowing without beginning or end in sight. In her vision, she noticed the river growing larger. She realized that she was falling towards it. Her last silver of will was also fading away in the endless darkness. Suddenly, a cacophony of noises broke through the silence and echoed in her ears. It wasn't those whispers. She heard everyone's prayers for her, and their concern and worry reached her heart, jolting her awake. She saw Lucas praying to her, making jokes about the promise they made to each other, and then she saw Blaze admonishing her for being reckless, despite his concern in his voice. Finally, she realized it. They were her anchors. As she felt her anchors, her consciousness became clearer. A blinding light erupted in the endless darkness in front of her, morphing into the figure of Ocas's. He sighed as he looked at the tragic figure of Diana. Diana, you're still as stubborn as ever. But ironically, it is what got you here, so don't give up hope just yet. I'm watching over you and can't wait for you to show off your prowess. Finally, don't forget to destroy Medici. Diana felt a terrifying anchor establish itself to her upon hearing his words. Her lips curved into a smile, and tears streamed down her cheek. As the weight on her shoulders lightened, she finally declared with clear eyes filled with emotion, I will. Then her figure was bathed in golden light, full of hope and glory, illuminating the entire darkness. What she didn't realize was that her knowledge emperor potion was digesting at a breakneck pace right now. Northern continent, no man's land Excalibur. Medici was taken aback when he saw the sword, which resembled a sword from a legend he had heard from the creator. At the same time, it felt different, though Medici couldn't pinpoint what the difference was. But he had an instinct that this sword was not the one described in the legend. This feeling perplexed him. Medici put his thoughts aside and focused on Diana, whose entire figure was engulfed in golden flames as her screams faded. She wasn't worthy? He laughed aloud as he looked up at the sky. It's not surprising, given that she's your angel, Ocus's. Medici's eyes narrowed suddenly, and he raised his red sword to his side without hesitation. Clang! A golden sword blazed towards him and clanged with such force that the everything collapsed, forming the massive crater with them in the center and disintegrating the nearby mountain range to fine dust. Boom! Boom! It didn't stop there, as Krakes appeared across the no-man's land that stretched into northern continent, with masses of lands lifting up from the ground on one side, filling the entire battlefield in dust and smoke. All of this was caused by a single sword clash. Medici's face was solemn in the crater, but when he saw the sword vanish and a figure emerge from the dust and smoke, his shining eyes and twisted smile told a different story. Diana walked out with a terrifying aura erupting from her. She was dressed in silver armor, with a blue cloak fluttering behind her and a purple crown on her head. Her iris were no longer blue, but rather golden with a scorching radiance. Finally, she took the legendary sword in her hand and casually swung it to her side, causing a slash of light to erupt. Then, it expanded in its path and went to the mountains that had not been destroyed by their clash. Boom! The slash of light split the mountains in half, with the separated half floating above and disintegrating in light. Diana said as she pointed the Excalibur at Medici. "It's now my turn, Medici." Chapter 53. Excalibur, Medici, and Diana exchanged glances as their auras collided in a battle for dominance. Everything around them fell silent, like the calm before the storm. Then it all came crashing down in a spectacular way, as Medici and Diana vanished from their position, leaving massive craters in their wake due to the sheer force they were exerting with each of their moves. The figures of Medici and Diana transformed into streaks of golden and red lights that blazed through the sky, colliding and repelling against each other along the way. The angels evacuating from no man's land came to a halt and stared blankly up at the sky. The entire sky was filled with streaks of golden and red lights, as if someone had drawn the most complex zigzag formation on the sky. This only appeared a fraction of a second after Diana and Medici took off into the sky, indicating they collided many times within this second, which was even far beyond what even angels could clearly do or sense. "Run!" An angel's horrified yell jolted them out of their trance, and their eyes some filled with fear. All of them did not hesitate to turn back and begin using their techniques or entering the spirit world to flee the battlefield as soon as possible. Boom. The destructive force erupted from the clashes of Diana and Medici, then impacted on no man's land without any resistance. Destruction. When this terrifying force descended, everything was broken down into fine particles, whether it was mountains or rivers, angels or demigods. Nothing could remain intact or survive the destruction. As everything disintegrated, the angels fled using various methods. But no matter what, they couldn't escape the approaching destruction, which was faster than them. However, the gods did not sit back and watch their angels disintegrate, as the light of the sun fell on all of their figures, teleporting them out of the battlefield. In the sky, Diana was solemn and grave, her eyes trailing each of the slashes in Medici's countless sword attacks on her. With swift moves of her sword, she blocked and parried all of them. She did, however, feel the attack power increase with each attack thrown at her. Boom, boom. She finally made a decision and ignored the incoming sword attacks and raised her Excalibur, which began to glow with golden light. She looked at the elated Medici, who didn't seem to care about anything but battle. It irritated her so much that she wanted to punch him in the face to get that smirk off his face. She ignored the sword slashes falling on her, which left long gashes on her silver armor. Suddenly, Diana's figure became translucent, and all of the sword's attacks passed through her figure, further destroying the lands behind them. She vanished from her position and reappeared directly in front of Medici, causing the latter's eyes to narrow and to raise his sword to the position of chest. Diana thrusted her Excalibur forward with all her might, aiming for his heart. It wasn't a simple thrust, for the air around the entire sky was extracted and everything fell silent. Boom! Then it clashed with the red sword. The air finally exploded, releasing a blaze of light. The space shook and collapsed as it was illuminated and overwhelmed by the light storm that was sweeping everything. Diana and Medici continued to clash their swords as sparks of light as bright as the sun flared up. Both of their armor began to crack, and blood poured out from the very cracks, revealing deep gashed wounds. Meanwhile, due to the sheer force of Diana's attack, they also shot out of no man's land. They were blazing across the sky like shooting star, heading towards Solomon Empire. Boom! They blasted into the Solomon Empire as the twisted rules woven throughout the empire literally broke into pieces along with the space in their paths. The Black Emperor's rules over the empire is indeed strong, but that doesn't mean it can't be broken. This was also largely facilitated due to the fact that the rules had lost their connection to the authority that supported them. Solomon did not exercise his authority to stabilize the rules. He knew the six gods would not just stand by and watch, but would immediately accuse him of intervening in their battle. He didn't want to fight them right away, so he could only watch everything with red eyes. However, he will not hesitate to intervene if they become too destructive. The previous clash of sword alone caused a flash of light that completely destroyed no man's land and even affected the Six Kingdoms. He is certain that if they continued without the intervention of the gods, the northern continent would be destroyed. The blazing star was descending from the sky in the Solomon Empire toward a long mountain range with a beautiful city in front of it. Hornaces Mountain Range. Boom! The shooting star finally descended with enough power to make nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. The collision obliterated a 20-kilometer wide area in an instant, resulting in an explosion of rocks and magma erupting from the ground. As the entire northern continent rumbled, a massive shockwave shattered faces of most mountains across the range. A gargantuan explosion ensued, which ripped through the beautiful city of night, obliterating Gothic buildings in a matter of seconds and submerging thousands of people who were still oblivious, thus instantly ending their lives without any pain or suffering. After everything had settled down, all that remained was the main peak of the Hornaces Mountains, with a ruined castle perched atop it. The castle and main peak were collapsing minute by minute, insinuating that they were still affected by the explosion, despite an archangel's desperate attempts to protect everything. In a massive corridor, two figures stood up from the ruined ground, still clutching their sword tightly. Medici walked steadily, his black armor shattered, especially the chest plate, revealing a hole through, which clearly displayed his beating heart and devastated lungs. His crimson blood had completely saturated his armor, dripping down on the ground and leaving a blood trail as he walked. Even though he blocked the legendary sword's attack, he was still affected in the end. However, all of his injuries began to heal visibly. This would be a fatal blow to most, but it's nothing for Medici. Diana, on the other hand, was not faring much better. In their collision, her silver armor was completely shattered and broke into pieces, leaving her with only blue traditional robes that were also covered in blood, as deep gashes on her skin could be seen across her figure. Her arm that held the Excalibur was broken, but she didn't even flinch as she twisted it back with her other hand. Her face was also covered in blood, which was dripping from her head. She walked towards Medici, holding the Excalibur, their gazes locked. Despite seeing him in this devastated state, she didn't feel joy because she knew better. "It's been a long time," Medici said as he spat blood from his mouth onto the ground, "since I've been forced into this state. Even though you are an angel of Caucasus, you are fully worthy of wielding the legendary sword and confronting me with all of my might, Diana." He finished with a twisted smile and his eyes shimmering with joy and excitement as his sword began to emit crimson light. Diana laughed tragically. "Am I worthy?" She considered the weight she carried on her shoulders as she held the holy sword in her hand. Those scenes flashed before her eyes, and while everything may have seemed to pass in seconds in reality, it was so long for her that she lost track of time there. Under the terrifying whispers, she almost felt like she was in eternity. Diana took a breather to calm down her raging emotions as she raised her Excalibur above her head with both hands. The entire holy sword was bathed in a golden light that radiated glory and hope. She finally glared at Medici and spoke to him word by word. "You know nothing about me." Medici chuckled and raised his sword as the crimson light on the sword surged widely like flames. "Diana, I hope you make it through this, so we can still fight the next time we meet." He smirked and spoke quietly. Then, without hesitation, he swung his sword down with all of his might. Boom! The red sword emitted a beam of crimson light, annihilating everything in its path, including space and reality itself. Rumble. The entire northern continent rumbled visibly as the crimson beam struck the ground, causing earthquakes across the world. Diana looked at the crimson beam that was heading straight for her. She inhaled deeply as her eyes, which had flashed with a kaleidoscope of emotions, finally settled into calmness. As a beam of light erupted from her holy sword, she clutched the Excalibur with both hands. She declared, as her voice rang out around the world, "Excalibur." She swung her sword, unleashing all of its power as the golden beam of light descended into the world, blazing towards the crimson light. The golden beam cut through everything in its path. The golden and crimson light beams blazed towards each other, annihilating everything in their path. The gods, who were watching this, finally rose solemnly from their seats. Eternal, blazing sun, Earth Mother and Black Emperor didn't hesitate to descend on the battlefield immediately. However, it was already too late. Under the gazes of the entire world, the beams of crimson and golden light finally collided. Boom! An unimaginable sea of scorching light surged out, drowning the figures of Diana and Medici. As the light completely submerged them, they both closed their eyes and their grips on their swords finally loosened. Chapter 54. History. Few hours later, Lucas paced back and forth in the divine kingdom of eternal blazing sun before a massive silver door, his face tense. Creak! The door creaked and opened as Aucuses walked out. Lucas dashed toward him and quickly inquired, "How's she doing, my lord? Is she okay? Is she awake?" Aucuses saw worry written all over Lucas' face. Then he said with a light nod, "Diana is fine now, Lucas. I was able to heal her and stabilize her condition. She is still sleeping and will be for some time, so be quiet if you want to see her." Diana was actually on the verge of losing control after wielding the legendary sword and fighting against Medici. Lucas's worried expression faded as he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then he bowed quickly and literally ran into the room. Aucuses sighed and turned to look into the room, where Diana lay in bed and Lucas already sat beside her, watching over her. He waved his hands as the door closed, leaving the couple alone. Then he began walking down a long corridor lined with white pillars and oil paintings on the walls, eventually reaching the weapon shelf. He summons his weapon from here. He raised his right hand as Excalibur appeared in his hands with flash of light. Aucuses gazed at the holy sword with gleaming eyes, analyzing every detail of the sword in his hand. The Excalibur is far from what Diana can envision with her authority, but he personally blessed her with her hermit uniqueness, which played a significant role in the successful envisioning of the holy sword. However, the person who envisioned still have to pay the price. He also intervened at that time personally and also instructing Blaze, Lucas, and everyone else to pray for her and support her through the ordeal. Aucuses was still quite surprised when he first gazed at the envisioned sword. He wasn't sure if this could wield the same power as original held by Altria. However, after seeing the results, he is certain that, while not fully comparable to the actual Excalibur, it is not far behind. His thoughts turned to the battle between the Medici and Diana. The Excalibur allowed Diana to compete with Medici in battle, and despite nearly destroying the northern continent, their battle was truly spectacular though. He, Lilith, and Solomon eventually descended onto the battlefield, only to see the sea of scorching light expand outwards, annihilating everything in its path. If the light wasn't stopped, it would go on to completely data the northern continent. When Lilith saw this, she used her authority over Earth to tear apart the entire massive crater from the ground, as the Sea of Light was also contained within the crater by her authority. Meanwhile, he and Solomon rushed to protect Diana and Medici, who were both seriously injured, though Medici fared better than Diana. The crater with the Sea of Light was then thrown into the astral world by Lilith. It completely exploded there, illuminating the entire world sky. It was the end of their battle. Aucuses' gaze wandered over weapons on his shelf, which he had collected over thousands of years, finally settling on the newly added one. It was the sword based on the Sword of Rupture, EA. He recently sent it to Artisan to repair the damage caused by their fight with the Mother Goddess of Depravity. Artisan was more than happy to assist and fixed it for free. Aucuses chuckled as he thought of Artisan's obvious ways of gaining favor with them. Suddenly, he turned around, only to see Ammonizes enter the hall through the door, a sleeping boy floating near her as she walked towards him. "Why is he asleep?" Aucuses inquired, his brow furrowed in curiosity as he pointed to the boy floating near her. Well, Septon was the mysterious floating boy. When I descended there, he was on the verge of losing the battle. The authority of degeneration began to have an effect on his soul. Ouroboros, on the other hand, was not much better. After noticing the situation, your son imploded, severely injuring him. Ammonizes spoke softly, her gaze wandering over the oil paintings on the wall. I took care of the pollution that was bothering him and put him to sleep so he could recover faster. Though fate truly favored Ouroboros. She said vaguely, "It's not destiny," Ammonizes. "You should be more aware of this than I am." Aucuses smiled, his eyes growing distant. "It is his blessing to his most devoted and favored angel." Ammonizes remained silent. While Aucuses waved his hands, light appeared in the hall and gathered on the figure of the will. It aided his recovery and teleported him to one of the castle's rooms, which also had ice cream waiting for him. When he walked up, "Is that the fabled sword?" Ammonizes inquired ethereally, her gaze finally settling on the Excalibur in his hands. "Yes." Aucuses nodded, raising the sword and looking at it as he continued. "Would you like to wield it?" He reached out his sword to her. Ammonizes took the Excalibur in her hands and caressed it with her fingers, as her eyes behind her gauze flashing with a slight melancholy. "The worthy are the one who can unleash the sword's power, despite the fact that we, the gods, can hold it in our hands. Only Diana has the ability to unleash its true power." As he observed her actions, Aucuses explained, while also closing the small distance between them by walking towards her. "Aucuses, you're also certainly worthy, aren't you?" Ammonizes asked abruptly, looking straight at Aucuses. "The sword is the crystallization of mankind's hopes and dreams. An archangel cannot bear the burden and cost of visualizing something like this." "Oh," Aucuses admitted, "you picked up on that." Ammonizes, "You're truly the mother of concealment. Nothing seems to be able to hide from your gaze." With a chuckle, he said, "So, Aucuses, you can actually use the Excalibur." While ignoring his remakes about her, Ammonizes pressed. "Indeed," Aucuses gave a nod. "However, I am worse than Diana. She is the one who bore everything directly. I simply assisted her from behind. Diana is truly extraordinary," Ammonizes remarked as she returned the sword to him. "Here, isn't that obvious?" Ammonizes. Aucuses spoke as he took Excalibur and placed it on his weapons shelf. "Considering who their leader is," he said it with a narcissistic smirk on his lips. "You're still the same in many ways, Aucuses." After hearing his narcissistic words, Ammonizes responded ethereally, her lips behind the gauze turning upwards to form a shallow smile. Something suddenly drew their attention, however, as Aucuses and Ammonizes turned to face the direction of Solomon Empire. "It's time." Aucuses turned to face her. "The betrayal will occur at sundown. History is truly repeating itself," Ammonizes stated as she gazed at the Solomon Empire. Then, while staring at Aucuses, she said, "Umbella has already built a natural barrier around the Sea of Ruins. It should suffice, as they'll only be keeping Sasra at bay." Aucuses was indifferent. "While we slay Solomon." Then, Aucuses' figure was immediately bathed in golden flames, as his suit was completely burned away in the flames, replaced by silver armor. The symbol of sun graced upon his glabella, and his golden iris became vertical as the flames that bathed his figure gathered to form two fiery, golden wings behind him. He held a purple book in one hand while the other was empty. Then, he finally turned to look at Ammonizes, his golden vertical eyes gleaming. Ammonizes wore a layered black gown with countless sparkling specks of radiance like stars. Her ribs and waist each stretched out 2 arms. 2 of the 6 hands held a black scythe, 2 held a crimson moon, and the rest were empty. She finally turned. Her deep dark eyes gazed at him. "Aucuses, let's go." Chapter 55. Betrayal. The setting sun cast in twilight glow on the Solomon Empire. The capital, which is located in the heart of the Solomon Empire, also serves as the empire's core. This city, on the other hand, can only be described as crooked, as it has the potential to push a perfectionist insane at first sight. The city was filled with the black Gothic buildings. Their style was oddly lopsided and crooked. The city's streets and roads were built without any order, resulting in complete unevenness throughout the city. The bustling streets were packed with people who defied the current outside world's common sense in every way. Their dressing style was asymmetrical, and their habits and manners were diametrically opposed to world standards. Despite this, people went about their daily lives as if everything was normal. A priest sat on one of the benches on the sidewalk, his figure illuminated by the setting sun, revealing his golden beard and hair. He was dressed in a pure white cloak with a silver cross across his neck, just like any other priest. His golden and clear eyes, on the other hand, revealed his exceptionality clearly. Despite the stark contrast between the priest and everything around him, people walked by was completely oblivious to priest on the bench. Adam, the angel of imagination. Adam was holding a simple feather quill in his right hand and a book on his lap, while writing with the quill in the last page of the book. He also took occasional glances at the bizarre, yet strangely beautiful city while writing the book. He was like a spectator, observing but not interfering in any direct way. He was present at the beginning and returned to witness its end. He showed Solomon and others the second blasphemy slate with the path of the god at the beginning of the epic, finally layering the cornerstone for the empire to rise. He witnessed the rise of the Solomon Empire, the very first human empire since the destruction of modern civilization. He was ever present in all major events throughout history of the fourth epic. The angel families that rose to prominence during this period, as well as the three kings of angels, Cheek, Artisan, and Bethel, who were only one step away from godhood, were all facilitated and made possible by him. As his golden eyes gleamed in brilliance, Adam wrote the final paragraph of the book. The radiance of sun and moon illuminated the empire. The national flag in the top spire of the royal palace fell from its pole onto the dusty ground. The terrified crowd paid no heed as they stamped on the flag that they had once revered above their own lives. The golden sun and crimson moon descended on the empire, bringing the magnificent empire that had stood for a millennia to an end. The end. Adam finished and closed the book as the cover revealed the title, which was boldly written on it. The Solomon Empire. His gaze was finally pulled to a Gothic castle as he saw two angels walk out of the balcony, one of them holding a brass book. Adam's golden eyes become deep and mystical for a brief moment after seeing those angels. Then, his gaze was drawn to his finished book, which he took and placed within his robes. He raised his hand as a new book appeared from nowhere on his hands. Adam gently caressed the black cover as illusory letters appeared on it in a jumbled fashion, eventually joining to form a title on the book, which said, Tudor Trunsoist United Empire. He opened the book and took the quill, writing on the first page. The beginning, Adam, on the other hand, did not continue, but instead closed the book and placed it in his robes. He then rose from his seat and walked in the direction of the Gothic castle. His figure vanished among the crowds under the illumination of twilight. Two angels walked out of a room onto the balcony of the Gothic castle, their figures illuminated by the twilight. The angel in front had brass-colored hair and golden eyes. He had attractive features, but exuded a scholarly air. He was holding a brass book in his right hand. The brass book is the uniqueness of Justiciar Pathway. The angel following behind had brown hair and a sharp, reserved face. He had blue eyes that were filled with indifference. They were Trunsoist and Elitza Tudor, the subordinates of the Solomon, Black Emperor. Trunsoist came to a halt at the edge of the balcony and looked out over the city. His eyes were hesitant, and his heart was full of self-doubt and questions. His grip on the brass book tightened as his gaze wandered to the royal palace in the heart of the city. His eyes was drawn to the waving flag atop the spire. He instinctively took a step back and dare not look at it again. Elitza noticed this and grabbed his shoulders, causing Trunsoist to turn to face him. Trunsoist, there is no turning back. Every minute counts from now on, as our lives hang in the balance. The Majesty will soon discover what is wrong, and Mr. Dor will be powerless to protect us by then. Elitza said solemnly, but a tinge of jealousy rose in his eyes as he looked at the Trunsoist in front of him. However, seeing his hesitation, which didn't go away even after hearing this, Elitza sighed and took his hands off the other's shoulders. In the end, it's your choice. He said it firmly, as if he was willing to die alongside Trunsoist even after being exposed. Alitsa finally said, as his blue eyes gleamed, "Remember our dreams, Trunsoist. They cannot fade alongside us." What Alitsa and Trunsoist didn't realize was that they weren't alone. A priest was nearby, quietly watching everything that was going on. A flash of blue light appeared near the priest, and a black-haired man materialized nearby. Bethel Abraham, Mr. Dorr. Bethel stood silently next to Adam, gazing at the two angels and listening in on their conversation. Finally, he asked Adam, "Do you think he'll be able to do it?" Adam finally turned to face Bethel. His golden eyes, which were always serene and calm, gleamed brightly as he looked at Bethel for a brief moment, which went unnoticed by Bethel. Then he replied softly, as his gaze fixed on the golden sun on the horizon, "It's always the unexpected ones that surprises everyone in the end." Bethel's brows furrowed in surprise, and he remained silent. They were just standing in the twilight of the sun, watching history repeat itself. Trunsoist took a breather at the edge of the balcony to calm his raging emotions. He looked at Alitsa, and his words echoed in his ears. "Remember our dreams, Trunsoist. They cannot fade alongside us." Soon, the last words of Eternal Blazing Sun during the meeting flashed through his mind. "Trunsoist, with your own hand, you will usher in the new era. The era of order and justice will arrive, just as you envisioned." "My dream," Trunsoist thought as his entire life flashed before his eyes, those lies and deception stinging his heart. He walked forward, his eyes shining, the last of his hesitation and self-doubt gone, as did the pain in his heart. He opened the brass book, which began to flicker with light, and a divine aura erupted from him. The divine aura morphed into massive symbols of the 6 gods that hung in the sky. Soon, the symbols entered Turnoist's body one after the other, under the blessings of 6 gods. His figure expanded into a gigantic black shadow that covered the entire sky, holding the brass book in one hand and an Ilshuri balance scale in the other. Turnoist gazed at the Solomon Empire, illuminated by the twilight, as the brass book shone brightly. He declared, as his majestic voice reverberated throughout the world, "All rules are ineffective." Chapter 56, Chaos and Order. All rules are ineffective. As a flash of brass light swept the Solomon Empire, Trunsoist's majestic voice reverberated around the world. "Trunsoist." A furious voice thundered from the royal palace, and an aura of chaos erupted, sweeping the empire like a black tide. The authority of chaos and order collided in a magnificent war for dominance, as the reality around the entire empire began to glitch. Despite the Black Emperor's desperate efforts, the Solomon Empire began to crumble, as if it were nothing more than a fragile sand castle hit by a powerful wave. "No, Your Majesty!" Exclamations rang out across the empire as realization struck everyone. The rules, woven into the reality of the empire by Black Emperor, gradually faded under order of Trunsoist. Trunsoist's order is also far from simple. It contains his subconscious desire for the ideal empire he dreams about. The authority of order exerted on reality was based on his dreams, so it wouldn't be wrong to say that his dream began to influence reality. Trunsoist was able to do this due to the justiciar uniqueness, and the authorities of the 6 gods assisted him throughout the ordeal. He was able to accomplish this largely due to the order of Aukis's supporting him, the life of Lilith relieving him of the burden, and, finally, Ammonize's concealment. The order finally clashed with Black Emperor's chaos, who fought to prevent it from influencing and changing his empire. However, even with the support of 6 gods, Trunsoist's order will only be short-lived. The reality around the empire flickered and glitched at phenomenal rate. With each glitch, the reality altered. One moment, it was a paradise with order and balance. Another moment, it revealed a distorted empire riddled with chaos and corruption. The ever-changing realities in the glitches eventually converged on these two. The changes in reality were profound, as everything within the empire was changing as well. The common people in the capital walked around wearing asymmetrical style dress, but due to sudden glitch in reality, their dress transformed into noble suits and gowns identical to the fashion in the outside world. Their habits and manners, which were diametrically opposed to world standards, also changed to perfectly match it. The crooked and lopsided buildings, as well as the streets and lanes, became normal and orderly. This type of change occurred not only in the capital, but throughout the empire. But this paradise of order did not last long, as the twisted Solomon Empire retuned with yet another glitch. The majority of people in the empire were completely oblivious to changes. However, they can be considered fortunate when compared to angels and archangels, who were conscious throughout the entire alterations of reality. This seemed to go on indefinitely, as the authority of order and chaos clashed for dominance. Soon, balance was finally broken. Despite the fact that everything seemed to take an eternity, it had only been a few seconds in reality. Finally, the changes eventually settled on the same twisted and distorted empire. As order began to crumble, chaos won. With its fall, however, it also completely destroyed the rules woven into the reality of the Solomon Empire. Suddenly, the sky around the entire world changed as the sun in the horizon rose to the middle of the sky, and a crimson moon rose from the other end of the sky. The sun and moon appeared in the sky at the same time, as one part of the sky became day and another part of the sky became night. At this point, rules of Solomon were completely lifted, allowing the gods to directly extend their power into the empire and removing Solomon's established advantage. The radiance of the celestial bodies illuminated the Solomon Empire, eventually converged on the royal palace in the heart of capital. At a perceptible rate, royal palace became imaginary. However, chaos sprang from within the castle once more, attempting to twist the trajectory of the light of sun and moon. However, it failed, as the light of the sun and moon shined brightly throughout the castle, illuminating the entire structure. The royal castle then vanished from the material world. Trunso's figure returned to normal in the balcony, and he began falling to the ground unconscious. As the light faded, the brass book dropped from his grip as well. Alitsa grabbed him and the book, his hands still quivering and his eyes filled with horror and despair as he remembered what he had just gone through. The entire experience completely scarred his heart forever. He was jolted out of his stupor as a hand was placed in his shoulders. Then he turned around to see Mr. Dorr standing there. "Leave the capital as soon as possible." As he glanced at the sun and moon in the sky, Bethel murmured solemnly, "The war of gods is about to begin. However, where could we possibly go?" Alitsa was nevertheless cautious, given their traitorous status. "Pray to Earth Mother." As his figure dissipated, Bethel said, "She'll look after you and help Turnoist in his recovery." With his disappearance, the entire capital began to tremble as if an earthquake had struck, and plants and trees began to grow at an astonishing rate. Alitsa, seeing this, did not hesitate to mentally recite the honorific name of Earth Mother. In the next moment, he and Turnoist vanished from the capital. People were racing about around the capital, terror and panic obvious on their faces in the midst of the mayhem. They were indifferent as they stamped on the national flag, which they once regarded as more important than their own lives. Adam was sitting on the same bench. He glanced at the flag on the dusty ground before taking his new book and starting to write on the first page. Tudor Turnoist United Empire. Beginning dash, Chapter 1, Betrayal. In the vast astral world, which was even more abstract than the spirit world, seemed to encompass all of the universe's authorities and symbolism. In this infinite space filled with illusory stars, a Gothic-styled palace appeared. Two enormous figures floated towards the castle from the corners of the astral world. A woman wearing a long, layered black dress that was not complicated but had countless stars speckled on it. A pair of huge arms covered in dark black short hair grew out of both her torso and waist, but there was a beautiful and gentle face covered in thin black gauze. One of her two hands held a massive scythe, and the other held the crimson moon. The remaining pair held nothing as though she was holding an invisible object. Ammonizes, Evernight Goddess. A man wearing silver armor with golden streaks that gleamed with light. He had an angular face, short white hair, and his golden vertical iris that glinted brightly. A pair of massive wings emerged from his back shoulder, composed of fiery golden features that coated with flames. He held a purple book in one hand and an exaggerated sword bathed in red light in the other. Arcus's eternal blazing sun. With their approach, the royal palace began to collapse. The massive walls, spires, and tower fell one by one, revealing a figure sitting on a black throne to the astral world. The figure was a middle-aged man in royal robes and a black crown. He had long black hair that reached his hips and deep black eyes. He had angular features and exuded aura of authority and sternness. Solomon, the Black Emperor. Solomon sat on his throne, his expression calm and majestic, overlooking the two gods coming for his life from above. When his gaze landed on the white-haired god, his deep black eyes flashed with rage, and his fingers were tightly pressed in his armrest, nearly cracking it. Osizes, Solomon spoke in low voice, but anyone could sense the seething rage hidden within. It's you again. His eyes flashed with memories of humiliations he had suffered as a result of Arcus's to everything that had happened up to this point. His tone finally changed as his face twisted in rage and his black eyes shone brightly. His voice rang out across the astral world as he slammed his arms against his throne, shattering it. You took everything from me. Was the war between order and chaos good? That part took me a long time to write, because both of those authorities are too abstract. But I did try my best. Chapter 57, Ravings and Horror Whoosh. Solomon was greeted with a colossal sword soaked in red light, which was thrusted with such force by Arcus's that it entirely shredded the very fabric of reality. A phantom of crimson moon rose just above the sword. The crimson moonlight with the authority of Een flowed onto the sword. The moonlight swirled around the blade before combining with the red light on the sword, further saturating the light and turning it blood red. What the hell is this sword? Solomon thought in shock, while all of his senses and instincts screamed in danger, the kind that could take his life in an instant. He was most surprised by the sword. Within the sword, he felt the authority of twilight and sun. He couldn't fathom how that was possible in the first palace. The authority of Een was now combined with the sword, making it even more powerful. Just then, a legend about Arcus's that he had heard when he was an archangel flashed through his mind. He had dismissed it at the time because he thought the legend was outrageous and false, but this was totally due to his prejudice against Arcus's. According to legend, the white angel betrayed the creator by stabbing his sword into the creator's heart under the twilight of the sun. The sword was completely stained with the blood of the creator. It also said to have cast twilight over the entire world before to the cataclysm, foreshadowing the end. This legend led many people to claim that the sword of Arcus's was the most powerful weapon on the planet. If this is indeed that sword, he is certain that he has no chance under it. Solomon felt remorse as he reflected on his past, but he didn't dwell on it and instead focused on the situation at hand. He didn't use his authority to twist anything related to the sword because he knew it would utterly fail. The sword was ripping the fabric of reality. Without the foundation of reality, his authority would be completely vulnerable. He cannot bring disorder to void because there is only nothingness in void. This was one of his weaknesses, which he had recognized a long time ago, and he had already devised a method to make up for his weakness. Solomon rose from his shattered throne and gazed at the blood sword. He raised his hand and made a twisting gesture, while also asserting his authority of disorder. But just then, a sound of laughter pierced his ears, echoing around him. Solomon's hand froze, and his gaze was drawn to Arcus's, who was staring at him, while thrusting the blood sword towards him. Arcus's laughed, and the purple book in his hand shimmered. The eye in the center of the book cover began to glow with light. He opened his mouth and spoke words that most common people wouldn't understand. These words entwined to form terrifying and crazy ravings. You are truly amusing, Solomon. You recall the angel in whom you had the most faith. Trunsoist is truly one of a kind, as he seeks order and justice above all. It's odd that you trusted him despite knowing all of this, but considering your character, you must have dismissed him as a coward and weakling. But ironically, he was the first to nail your coffin shut. Your empire, of which you were so proud, is collapsing. Your ostensibly loyal subjects are showing their true colors. How do you feel, Solomon? Betrayed by those closest to you and abandoned by those who swore allegiance to you. To be left all alone in this dark cosmos, only capable of witnessing your life crumble before your eyes and being powerless to prevent it. How does it feel, Solomon? And it's quite funny, Solomon, that you still think everything I did was just to destroy you. Let me tell you the truth. Everything I did was designed to bring down Sassurer. It's amazing to think that he has continued to dominate the planet and shape it to his liking even after his death. You, on the other hand, are nothing more than a poor worm in my way. Ocas's was deliberately using information to fill up the ravings through the authority of knowledge. He used this to subject Solomon to the effects of a two-pronged attack: the mental corruption caused by his ravings and the corresponding information to distract and torment him. He did this to disrupt Solomon's actions and push him to the brink of losing control, allowing him to thrust his sword into Solomon and kill him in a single blow. His ravings are far from ordinary. With the authority of the hermit and the status of God, his ravings can affect even true gods. This is even more so for Solomon, whose anchors are collapsing along with his empire. At that instant, the ravings of Ocas's echoed in Solomon's mind like sharp blades piercing through his psyche, tearing down his mind. The information poured into his mind, presenting everything that was going on in the world. The fall of his empire, the betrayal of the angels' families, indifference of everyone. The pictures replayed in his mind again and again, striving to dismantle him into the last of his bits. Solomon's form collapsed onto his throne, becoming pitch black like shadow, with countless eyes sprawled all over him. He was filled with regret, pain, and agony when he saw those images, and the emotions began to cloud his mind and heart. However, he was able to suppress these ravings and emotions for a split second due to his sheer willpower and authority. He then asserted his disorder authority without hesitation. He distorted the concept of sound, while also distorting the concepts of space and distance surrounding his figure to increase the distance between him and the sword, despite the fact that he knew this distortion would be immediately broken with the reality shattering of the sword. This will at least buy him some time, which he desperately needs. The ravings was silenced, and the blood sword that was close to his vision become distant. Immediately seizing this opportunity, Solomon desperately used his remaining anchors and authority to stabilize his mind, while removing the information and pollution in his mind. His mind and body improved visibly. The eyes on his shadowy figure began to fade one by one. He finally avoided the fate of complete loss of control. But just then, a flash of golden light swept through the surroundings with the aura of order. The order of Ocas's rendered his distortions in the concepts of sound, space, and distance completely void. As he felt the order, Solomon's eyes flashed with deep hatred. The previously silenced ravings resurfaced in his ears, and a distant red sword appeared not far from him. However, he refused to succumb to the same attack and rose from his throne. Suddenly, he was startled to see a burly figure. A divine woman in a long black gown appeared. Her face was draped in black gauze. She had a smile, which was visible through her gauze. Ammonizes how? Concealment, Solomon realized. However, his realization came too late. When his gaze fell on Ammonizes' smile, his face contorted in horror and fear. He appeared to have witnessed something beyond his comprehension or peered into the unknown itself. Ammonizes' honorific name also includes the Empress of Horror. Ocas's ravings also increased at the same time. Solomon's figure collapsed as an invisible storm of fear and ravings tore through his mind and wreaked havoc. His sanity was slowly eroding, pushing him over the edge. Ocas's increased the force of his sword thrust after noticing this. He intended to kill Solomon with a single blow of his sword. Solomon finally gave up, stabilizing his collapsing condition as he saw the red sword right in front of his heart. His last sanity desperately sought use authority of disorder one last time. He did not distort fear, sound, time, or reality, as one might expect. But it was something he had only recently discovered within himself. Misfortune. He was cursed with misfortune by Ammonizes during the battle, which he didn't realize until later due to her concealment and his poor mental state. Then, he distorted the concept of misfortune itself. Solomon immediately felt the ravings and fear leave his mind, and his collapsing figure came to a halt. He regained complete lucidity. He began to have illusions that the entire world revolved around him, and that he was the center of it all. He didn't get lost in this feeling, though. He knew it was due to the blessing of luck, which he had received through distorting misfortune. It also enabled to him to temporarily to get rid of his desperate situation. Solomon saw the red sword approaching his chest and about to pierce his heart. He didn't hesitate to use all of his power at this time. Chaos. He roared, and a divine aura erupted from him. Crack. The reality around his figure cracked and collapsed like shards of mirror. Solomon used his authority of disorder to destroy very order of reality, causing everything to fall into chaos. Before the sword could pierce him, the endless surging chaos consumed his figure and throne, completely covering everything like a cocoon. Arcus's eyes narrowed when he saw this, but his sword still advanced, blazing towards the torrent of chaos. Clang! When it finally collided, a flash of orange and golden light erupted, lighting up most of the astral world within the barrier, and even making the barrier visible. A massive, indescribable face with bloody tentacles appeared to cling to the transparent barrier at that moment. This indescribable being's gaze was entirely fixed on the Arcuses. Chapter 58. Historical Projection. Arcuses floated in the infinite space above the beautiful planet. His gaze traveled across the northern continent, witnessing chaos and war. Under his command, the angels of the six churches began to invade the Solomon Empire and eliminate any resistance. The light and thunder blazed across the empire, wreaking havoc. He saw the cities being engulfed in flame and lightning storms. The screams of pain echoed in his ears before being silenced forever. Chaos, destruction, war, fear. He saw it all on the continent beneath him. He was well aware that he was the source of all of this. His eyes reflected the burning people and destroyed lands. Even so, he was indifferent. Seeing the devastation caused by his actions, his heart didn't even flutter with any emotions. This was not because his divinity made him apathetic. He didn't try to deceive himself into believing that these were necessary sacrifices for a new and prosperous era to arrive. In fact, he couldn't care less. Other than his own people, he was completely unconcerned about others. He didn't care what happened to them, as long as those he cared about were safe and his goal was met. He recognized his own selfishness. But that's just who he is. He wasn't going to change that for anyone or anything. Did you find Solomon? Ammonizes asked. She was floating alongside him in the infinite space, turning to look at him. You know, there are times when I truly despise fate. Arcuses stated as he raised the purple book in his hands. I didn't expect him to distort my misfortune at the last minute. Ammonizes said, looking away. It isn't your fault. Your concealment couldn't last much longer. Arcuses said as the purple book in his hand began to shimmer with light. In addition, Solomon gave up on attempting to stabilize his body and mind. He's still as daring and reckless as ever. Fate, on the other hand, does not favor him. Ammonizes added ethereally, even though your attack was unsuccessful and he managed to escape thanks to his luck. With a chuckle, she emphasized luck. Ultimately, he was still affected by twilight. Come on. Arcuses spoke up suddenly, his eyes glowing purple. I track him down. He is in his divine kingdom, which in the sky of no man's land. Despite his situation, he seemed to have made every effort to cover his entire kingdom in many distorted rules in order to keep us from finding him. But it's a shame he's facing me. He said it with a smile. Is it because of information? Ammonizes inquired ethereally as she looked at the purple book. Let's go.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.